It was over. I was finished. My life was officially a joke. I wanted to scream at the heavens, but I couldn't even open my mouth. A few days ago, I was just a regular guy working a dead-end factory job, slaving away so my boss could afford a second wife. Then, everything went black. I woke up inside a dark, cramped space, realized I had been recycled, and was currently developing as a fetus in a womb. I spent a few days gathering information from the muffled voices outside. This wasn't Earth. I was in a mystical world called the Desolate Valley. It was a place where demons and immortals lived side by side. The powerful could split mountains, summon storms, and rule over entire provinces with a single word. A loser like me, someone so unremarkable that even a stray dog wouldn't look twice at me, should have died in the first 3 minutes here. But I got lucky. My new father was the head of the Qin family. The Qin family was legendary, a powerhouse of geniuses and masters known as the greatest family in the Desolate Valley. With a background like that, I could walk sideways through life. If I had a problem, I'd just call my dad. If that didn't work, I'd call my mom. My mother was no joke either. She was the saintess of Mount Tai, one of the 3 great sacred lands. And if my parents weren't enough, the family had 10 ancient ancestors backing us up. As long as I didn't provoke some freak with a main character halo, I could do whatever I wanted. I told myself I was overthinking it. Real life isn't a web novel. There was no way a chosen one actually existed. The idea that a random kid's lucky encounter could beat generations of hard work was just a funny story. Then, I stopped laughing. My mother drank a bowl of medicinal tea, just like she did every day. It was a special blend designed to boost a baby's potential. To give me a head start, the Qin family had used a secret technique to delay my birth for 100 years. I had been in here for 97 years already. I had 3 years left to go. But before I could absorb the energy from the tea, something else snatched it. The thing next to me wasn't satisfied. It started aggressively draining the energy right out of my own body. I felt exhausted, weaker than if I'd spent 20 days straight with a demanding girlfriend. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in here. There was a terrifying little monster right next to me. If he kept sucking my energy like this, I'd be dead in days. I felt a wave of pure terror. I wanted to get away from him, but there was nowhere to run. I was trapped in the womb, watching my life force drain away bit by bit. Suddenly, a voice rang out in my head. Asterisk ding. Epic grade, chosen one detected. System activating, asterisk. My heart sank. That monster next to me was a main character. Everyone knows being related to a protagonist is a high-risk job. You either get killed to start their revenge plot, or you become a burden they have to sacrifice to level up. Even if you survive, destiny usually grinds you into the dirt until you're a broken shell of a man. The system confirmed my fears. A screen appeared in my mind showing my twin brother's stats. Asterisk epic grade protagonist Halo. A once in 10,000 years talent. Luck, plus 9,999. Comprehension, plus 9,999. Potential, plus 9,999. Charm, plus 9,999. Family sacrifice rate, 50%. Asterisk. It even had a crisis mode. If he ever got into real trouble, his luck and charm would jump to 99.99%. And that family sacrifice rate? It spiked to 99.999%. Are you kidding me? I cursed internally. Is there no justice? I was the transmigrator. Why was my younger brother the protagonist? What did that make me? The villain? Asterisk ding. Host detected as a heaven-destined villain. Universe super invincible great villain system activated. Asterisk. The air, or the amniotic fluid, felt very still. Great. Being the twin brother of a protagonist was dangerous enough. Now I had to be the villain? That was like walking into a minefield with a magnet strapped to my chest. I started planning my survival immediately. I'd stay low. I wouldn't be greedy. I wouldn't chase women. I'd avoid every genius with a weird last name. If I saw a beautiful girl in trouble, I'd run the other way. Most importantly, I would never, ever do a classic villain laugh. Asterisk ding. Friendly reminder. Based on the system's analysis, the host is greedy, lustful, a chronic liar, and incredibly flashy. You will never be a quiet, honest man. Hey, watch your mouth. I snapped back. I'm a good person. When I saw the girl next door showering, I opened the window to give her fresh air. When the neighbor was away, I looked after his wife. I have the soul of a hero. The system ignored my defense and kept chiming. Asterisk ding. Villain starter pack issued. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the God-level Halo. Great Emperor's Presence. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the God-level Cultivation Art. 33 Heavens Creation Scripture. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the mythic grade item. Max-level red-haired omen trial card. Asterisk. I looked at the rewards. The Great Emperor's Presence gave me a tenfold multiplier to all my stats. The red-haired omen card let me experience the power of a supreme being who could suppress the entire world for 24 hours. Suddenly, being a villain didn't seem so bad. If someone wanted to fight me, let them come. Wait, no? I was a gentleman. I grew up reading the classics. I couldn't just fall into darkness. But then, I felt a sharp tug. My brother was still sucking my energy. I lost it. I aimed a kick right at his face. As Confucius probably said, if a gentleman doesn't strike hard, he can't establish authority. I kicked him, but the little brat didn't back down. He punched me back. My anger hit the ceiling. I couldn't stay here and be his battery. Fine, I thought. You want to play? Asterisk ding. Great Emperor's Presence Halo activated. Asterisk. I felt the change immediately. The tenfold multipliers surged through my tiny limbs, and suddenly, every part of my body overflowed with explosive power. I didn't hesitate. I lunged forward and delivered another kick. This one was nothing like the last. My little brother felt the impact and finally realized I wasn't someone he could bully. He turned submissive instantly, stopping his greedy absorption of my energy. So much for being the chosen one. He was just another coward who preyed on the weak. I felt a wave of disgust and couldn't resist giving him one more kick just for the hell of it. Asterisk ding. Host has kicked the chosen one. Reward, 10 villain points. Asterisk. 10 points? I knew the drill. I closed my eyes and called out to the system mall. A screen flashed in my mind, glowing with a golden light so bright it could blind a god. The items inside were legendary. There was the god-level Overlord's Aura for 99,000 points. It claimed to make men follow me to their deaths and women fall hopelessly in love. Then there was the Heart of Blackening, which allowed my power to multiply infinitely based on my rage. But the most insane one was this Sacrificial Laws. It was a passive god-level skill. If a close relative of mine was killed, the law would activate, giving me supreme power to slaughter gods and Buddhas regardless of their level. It was a total game changer. The only problem was the price. Every single one of these items cost 99,999 points. I looked at all those zeros and sighed. As a gentleman who studied the classics, I knew I had to overcome these obstacles. Confucius once said that by reviewing the old, we learn the new. Or maybe he said we need to stay active. I figured if I kept kicking the same person, I'd eventually gain a new perspective on life. Hiya. I felt my brother moving again, so I planted my foot right in his face. Asterisk ding. Host has kicked the chosen one. Reward, 10 villain points. Asterisk. Since I was still just a fetus developing in the womb, I ran out of energy pretty quickly. I felt sluggish, so I called on the system to help me practice the 33 Heavens Creation Scripture. A massive wave of information crashed into my brain like a rising tide. The paths of my meridians and the secrets of energy circulation were carved into my soul. I didn't know how the cultivation ranks worked in this world yet, but I started the process anyway. I fell into a deep trance. My mind went completely blank as energy from the outside world spiraled into my body like a violent hurricane. My little brother was terrified. He retreated to the furthest corner of the womb, shivering in fear. Finally, the brat was quiet. Outside, my mother, Yunxia, felt the shift. She was once the saintess of the Tai-Bai Immortal Mountain, and she felt me moving. She had been exhausted by my earlier struggling, but now she noticed something strange. I was absorbing spiritual energy in a perfect, rhythmic cycle. A natal cultivation art, she whispered, her face lighting up with joy. In this world, cultivation techniques were ranked from yellow to god level. Most were created by masters, but a natal art was different. It was something a baby created in the womb while still in a state of pure nature. It was a miracle that only happened once every 10,000 years. It meant I was born with 100% compatibility with my own technique. I was a genius among geniuses, winning the race before I was even born. My mother was ecstatic. She knew her position in the Qin family was now unshakable. Even the ancient ancestors would have to treat her with respect now. Her baby was creating a technique that surpassed the heaven grade. I was the future of the clan. Word spread fast. Several Qin family ancestors immediately broke their meditation and rushed to my mother's side. They were desperate to please her. They offered to rebuild her entire home mountain just to make her feel comfortable. They complained that she was only drinking 1 bowl of immortal dew a day and demanded she double it. They didn't want the neighbors thinking the Qin family was poor. Just as the old men were arguing, a cold snort echoed through the room, vibrating in their ears. "Get out of here and go back to your cultivation," a voice boomed. "If you scare the little guy, I'll hang you all from the crooked tree at the front gate and beat you." The ancestors scattered like startled birds. Even though the youngest among them was thousands of years old, they didn't dare talk back. This was the second ancestor of the Qin family. To him, they were just children. Getting hung from a tree and beaten in public would be a death sentence for their reputations. My mother tried to kneel in respect, but an invisible force held her up. "You're pregnant. Forget the formalities." The second ancestor's voice resonated with authority. "This child is sensing the laws of the universe. He has the potential to become a great emperor." The entire Qin family went into high alert. Thousands of elite disciples and masters were deployed to guard my mother. The security was so tight that if a mosquito flew by, they'd check to see if it was male or female. I didn't care about the guards. I just kept cultivating. After all, I had a great emperor's future to prepare for. A burly man stood by Yun Xie's side, a goofy, nonstop grin plastered across his face. This was the current head of the Qin family and my cheap, old man, Qin Tian. My mother gave him a look so sultry and sharp that it nearly made his heart skip a beat. For a second, he looked like he wanted to teach me a lesson about filial piety before I was even born. But then he remembered how important I was to the family. He tucked away his strict father persona and just prayed I'd be considerate enough to finally come out. I had no intention of leaving. My life inside the womb was a perfect routine: eat, sleep, and beat my younger brother. 3 years passed in a flash. Finally, the day of my birth arrived. The entire Qin family was in a frenzy. Elite disciples stood guard, weapons drawn. They had orders to kill anyone suspicious on sight. This was a monumental event for the clan. "Why isn't he out yet?" Qin Tian paced outside the room, his face twisted with anxiety. My mother's painful screams echoed through the doors, tugging at his heartstrings. "Don't be nervous. It's fine," the clan ancestors said. They sat in the courtyard sipping tea, acting like experienced elders who had seen it all. But their eyes kept darting toward the door. They weren't as calm as they looked. While high-level cultivation techniques were rare, the Qin family was the top clan in the desolate valley. They could find a few if they tried. What they really cared about was me. A child who could comprehend laws and reach the great origin realm before even being born was a human nuclear weapon. In a world where the strong ate the weak, no family would ever complain about having too many monsters like me. Inside, I noticed my younger brother trying to wiggle past me to claim the big brother spot. I didn't hesitate. I kicked him right back into his corner. Ever since I unlocked the Great Earth Constitution aura and started practicing the 33 Heavens creation art, I had spent every single day asserting my dominance. Now, if I even twitched, the little guy would shrink into the corner and tremble. I took the best nutrients first. He only got the leftovers once I was full. Plus, after 3 years of bullying him, I had accumulated over 33,200 villain points. I was ready to head out and spend them. 3 years are up, I thought. Time to show the world who's boss. I saw the light ahead. My mother struggled on the bed, her hands gripping the sheets so hard they nearly tore. With one final, piercing cry, she hit her limit. I surged forward, announcing my arrival to the desolate valley. I tried to shout, but it came out as a loud, healthy wail. "He's born. He's born. My son, Qin Feng, is here." Qin Tian shouted outside. He was so excited he could barely speak. The heavy stone in his heart finally dropped. Whether it was fate or just the family's choice, they named me Chin Feng. Suddenly, a mechanical chime rang in my head. Ding! System detects the birth of a heavenly mandate villain. Exclusive heaven and earth phenomenon initiated. The clear sky vanished instantly. Thunder roared, and thick, black clouds blotted out the sun. In the middle of the darkness, a blood-red moon appeared, glowing with an eerie light. An omen. A genius is born. Qin Tian laughed toward the sky. My son truly has the grace of the great earth. The disciples cheered, rushing to congratulate their leader. But the ancestors weren't laughing. They stared at the blood moon with grim expressions. A red moon meant disaster. It signaled that the world's righteous energy was fading, replaced by malice and resentment. It predicted war, fire, and the fall of nations. This child might bring a catastrophe to the desolate valley, one ancestor whispered. They looked at each other. Abandoning a genius of their own blood was impossible. If a great tribulation was coming, the Qin family would simply choose to fight their way through it. Meanwhile, other powers in the valley watched the red moon in fear, sending out spies to find out whose child had caused such an omen. The peace was over. Inside, I had been cleaned up and handed to Qin Tian. I looked up at him. This is my cheap dad? He's so ugly. My dream of being a peerless handsome man took a hit. He was a rugged, burly brute. I honestly wondered if my mom had married him just to spite her parents. Then I looked at my mother lying on the bed. My disappointment vanished. She was stunning, skin like snow, eyebrows like emerald feathers. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. With her genes, I figured I'd be fine. I could probably live off my looks if the whole cultivation thing didn't work out. Good. Excellent. Qin Tian checked my bone structure and laughed even harder. My constitution was terrifying, dozens of times stronger than a normal newborn. Because I had been practicing in the womb, I was already at the 6th level of the blood chi realm. I was stronger than the 8-year-olds in the clan. Just then, the midwife gasped. Wait, there's another one. It's twins. The room went silent. No one had realized there was a second child. If the first one was this monstrous, surely the second would be a genius too? The midwife checked again and shook her head. The second one, he won't come out. He wasn't trying to be unique. He was trying to tell us that he wanted his nutrients back. He was staying put. Qin Tian lost it. He grabbed the midwife by the collar. What do you mean he won't come out? Get him out now. I can't, she cried. He's too small. He's severely malnourished. If we force it, he'll be born with permanent defects. He needs at least 3 more years in the womb to recover. 3 years. Qin Tian looked like he was having a breakdown. 3 more years. Even though he hated it, he had to think of the child's future. He sighed and performed a secret technique to seal the womb, delaying the second birth for another 3 years. My brother was going to be a late arrival. I watched the midwife struggle, and I felt like I was losing my mind. You can actually give birth to half a child and leave the other half behind? My heart screamed in protest. There was an internal traitor. Someone, please, just stuff me back in there. I wasn't finished giving my little brother a piece of my mind yet. My good son. Call me Daddy. Come on, say Daddy. That was Qin Tian, my so-called father. He spent his days hovering over my crib, obsessed with his new role. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Every time he begged me to call him Dad, I just stared at him with a look of pure, innocent confusion. It made his face turn dark while my mother laughed until she cried. He was a total child, but he never got tired of it. He'd try dozens of times a day. What a loser. I had better things to do than entertain him. I called out to my system and opened them all. Ever since I was born, my cultivation speed had tanked. In the womb, I had the boost from the system and my mother's own power helping me along. Out here, I was on my own. I only had about 30,000 villain points, which wasn't enough to buy any major shortcuts. Host, I suggest purchasing the Comprehension Halo, the system chimed in. It will boost your understanding. If you can master the first level of the 33 Heavens creation art, your cultivation speed will double. The Comprehension Halo cost exactly 30,000 points and lasted for 1 month. It promised to increase my comprehension by 100 times. Even a pig would become a genius with a boost like that, let alone a super talent like me who had been soaking in spiritual energy for a century. I agreed to the swap. I needed to master that art. According to the records in my head, if I finished the whole set, I'd be immortal. Even if someone killed me, I could regenerate from a single drop of blood. It was the ultimate skill for a villain looking to rob people and steal their wives. Wait, no? I was a gentleman who read the Confucian classics. I couldn't let myself fall that far. A massive explosion rocked my mind as the halo activated. It felt like my soul was drifting out of my body. Everything about cultivation that used to confuse me suddenly became crystal clear. Spring went and autumn came. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. I was 3 years old now, a perfect little porcelain doll. I used my innocent looks and the social skills I kept from my past life to become the most popular person in the Qin family. I smiled at everyone. Whether it was the young single ladies or the married sisters, they all wanted to pick me up and kiss my cheeks. As a polite gentleman, I understood the concept of reciprocity. Every time a pretty lady kissed me, I made sure to kiss her back. The system kept accusing me of being a pervert and taking advantage of them, even awarding me villain points for it. Was I really that kind of person? Even if I had the heart for it, I didn't have the tools for the job yet. Besides, I had bigger problems. My brother, the chosen one, was still in the womb, and he was becoming a monster. He had the double room, all to himself now, and he was already sensing the laws of heaven and earth. He was even creating his own high-tier cultivation techniques. Sometimes, phantoms of dragon emperors circled my mother's belly, accompanied by the cries of phoenixes. The commotion was way bigger than when I was born. The whole Qin family was ecstatic. Even the great ancestor, who had been in seclusion for years, came out to name him. He called him Qin Hao, a name for a man who would challenge the heavens. Faced with a brother who defied all logic, I didn't dare slack off for a second. To everyone else, I was a genius on the same level as him, but I knew the truth. I hadn't actually mastered a birth technique in the womb. I just had a cheat code. I wasn't invincible for my level yet. I was already trailing behind him at the starting line. If I didn't want to be sacrificed or killed later, I had to move. I finally mastered the first level of the 33 Heavens creation art. My cultivation reached the 9th level of the Blood Qi realm. I was one step away from the Kaiyuan realm, the stage where you open your dantian to store spiritual energy. A 3-year-old in the Kaiyuan realm would break every record in history. Break! I sat cross-legged on my bed and shouted. I slammed all my spiritual energy against my dantian. A terrifying boom echoed inside my body. A dim, starry sky appeared within me, and spiritual energy flooded in like a tide, lighting up the stars with the power of creation. I had done it. Kaiyuan realm, level 1. I felt 10 times stronger than before. My recovery speed was now insane. I was one step closer to immortality, and one step closer to stealing people's. No, let's not go there. I looked up at the moon. It was almost time for my brother to be born. I actually missed the little guy. Ever since he took over my spiritual energy supply 3 years ago, my source of villain points had dried up. Bullying normal people barely gave me anything. Over 3 years of being harassed by the ladies of the house, I'd only scraped together about 4,000 points. It was hard-earned money. My foolish little brother, I whispered. Do you have any idea what I've been through these last 3 years? I looked at my 4,300 points. I hadn't spent a single one, terrified that my brother might trigger some clan extermination event the moment he hit the ground. But now that he was coming, I needed to gear up. I opened the mall and zeroed in on a movement technique called Phantom Escape. I couldn't afford the whole thing, but I could buy the first volume. Why didn't I just learn the family techniques? I had a system. Why waste time studying when I could just click buy? The first volume cost 4,000 points. It promised to make me light as a feather, leaving no footprints even in the snow. If you're a wolf, you sharpen your teeth. If you're a sheep, you train your legs. Facing a chosen one like my brother, I decided to become the fastest man in the world. If things looked bad, I was going to bolt. The exchange went through, and images of a figure moving with blinding, dizzying speed filled my mind. I was getting closer to my goal. The next day, the news of a 3-year-old reaching the Kaiyuan realm exploded through the Qin family like a thunderclap. A 3-year-old reaching the Kaiyuan realm was unheard of. It was a record breaker. My father, Qin Tian, was absolutely losing his mind with joy. His laughter echoed through the entire estate. He wanted to grab every person he saw and tell them his son had the potential of the great earth. I watched him and felt a pit in my stomach. In all the novels I'd read, fathers who bragged like this were usually the first ones to get killed off to give the protagonist a tragic backstory. "You're so wonderful, Fonger," my mother, Yinsiya, said. She walked over, rubbing her massive belly, and patted my head affectionately. She adored me. I was the perfect child. I never threw tantrums or kept her up at night. If I was hungry or needed a change, I just told her. Plus, I spent all my time cultivating. I was the definition of a model son. I rolled my eyes internally. I wasn't doing this for glory. I was doing it because my unborn younger brother was a walking disaster magnet. I didn't want to be collateral damage in his life story. While we were all standing there, the mood shifted. My mother's face twisted in pain. She clutched her stomach, and the air outside turned cold. A massive storm rolled in instantly. Thunder shook the ground, and flashes of lightning lit up the sky. In the clouds, the shadows of dragons and phoenixes began to swirl, turning from faint mist into solid gold. "The baby is coming," the servants shouted. The Qin family sprang into action. Maids ran back and forth with supplies. The elite guards formed a perimeter, weapons drawn. They weren't taking any chances with the family's future hope. "My foolish little brother," I whispered, my heart racing. "You're finally showing up." My dad was just as excited, though he was still a bit annoyed that the kid had stayed in the womb for an extra 3 years. He paced back and forth, wondering if this one would also have great Earth potential. Then, things went sideways. The lightning grew violent. My mother's screams filled the room, but the baby wouldn't come out. The dragon shadows in the sky started pacing frantically. Something was wrong. It was the second child. Why was this so hard? I started to worry that my brother's protagonist aura was already causing trouble. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure descended from the sky. It felt like a literal mountain was dropping onto our heads. The weight was so heavy it made the labor even more dangerous. "Who goes there?" my father roared. He unleashed his energy, and the Qin disciples joined him, pooling their power to block the crushing weight. But the pressure was too strong. We were losing. Just as we were about to break, 7 or 8 powerful auras erupted from the back of the estate. The Qin family elders had arrived. "Old dragon, do you want to start a war?" one of the elders barked. A white-haired man in golden dragon robes appeared in the sky. He looked kind and gentle, but I knew better. This was the Emperor of Great Xia. The Qin family was the strongest clan in the empire, which basically made us a giant target for the ruling class. He wasn't here to congratulate us. He was here to suppress a threat. "I was just testing the family's strength," the Emperor said, smiling as he floated down. He landed and looked straight at me. "Is this the eldest son?" He reached out his hand to touch me. My instinct screamed. I didn't wait. I activated my phantom escape technique. In a blur of motion, I vanished and reappeared several meters away, keeping a safe distance. I wasn't letting this guy get near me. If my brother's bad luck aura was active, the Emperor might just accidentally crush my skull. The Emperor's face went pale. He looked stunned. What kind of movement technique was that? For a master of his level, my speed wasn't the issue. He could still kill me with a flick of his wrist. The problem was that I was 3 years old. A 3-year-old who had reached the Kaiyuan realm and mastered a high-level movement technique was a monster. He looked at me, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was remembering the prophecy from 3 years ago, the blood moon that signaled the birth of a demon who would bring down the empire. He clearly thought I was that demon. My father was just as shocked as the Emperor. He didn't know where I'd learned that move, but he could tell it was high tier, something derived from the laws of heaven and earth. He stepped in front of me immediately. "Sorry, Your Majesty," my father said, though he didn't sound sorry at all. "The boy is shy around strangers." The elders crowded around me, protecting me like a pack of wolves. The Emperor stared at me for a long time, his eyes cold and calculating. Seeing that I had backup, I decided to lean into the innocent child act. I put on a big, fake smile and looked at him like he was my hero. "You must be the Emperor," I shouted, my voice high and squeaky. "I've heard so much about you. They say you're brilliant, brave, selfless, and the most righteous man in the world. Seeing you today, I can tell the rumors were true." I laid the flattery on thick, hitting him with a barrage of compliments. Then, I tilted my head and blinked my eyes innocently. But surely, a great and mighty emperor wouldn't visit someone's house empty-handed, right? The emperor's eye twitched. I had him trapped. If he said he wasn't a guest, he was admitting he came here to cause trouble in front of all our elders. But if he said he was a guest, he had to give me a gift. And he clearly hadn't brought one. No way. I gasped, looking horrified. Is the great emperor of Xia actually a cheapskate? The Qin elders were struggling to keep straight faces. They loved this. The emperor had tried to kill my brother with his pressure, and now I was making him look like a beggar in his own kingdom. He stood there, frozen, realizing he'd been played by a toddler. This whole situation served as a wake-up call for my family. We realized that we had to start planning ahead. If the imperial family ever decided to truly raise their butcher's knife against us, the Qin clan would be in serious danger. The emperor of Great Xia stood there, surrounded by my elders. With no one stepping in to save him from my cheapskate trap, he forced a smile that looked more like he was crying. He reached into his robes and reluctantly pulled out a small wooden box. When he opened it, 9 exquisite little swords, each no longer than a finger, rested inside. Even from a distance, I could feel the terrifying sword intent radiating from them. The 9 heavens swords. One of my ancestors gasped, recognizing them instantly. These weren't just toys. 10,000 years ago, they belonged to the legendary Sky Sword God. There were 9 individual blades, each with a name more terrifying than the last: Celestial Slayer, God Killer, Buddha Destroyer, Demon Subduer, Monster Slayer, Saint Cutter, Soul Chaser, Spirit Taker, and Army Breaker. Each one was a top-tier weapon on its own, but together, they formed a sword formation that could decimate 10,000 men. Combined, they ranked in the top 10 divine weapons of the entire desolate valley. I looked at that old loach of an emperor. I couldn't believe he had managed to track down all 9 scattered pieces. He probably thought he was just lending them to me. He likely believed that once he suppressed the Qin family, these swords would find their way back to his treasury. After all, the birth of 2 geniuses in our family didn't just threaten his throne, it broke the balance of power among all the great clans. The world's resources were a finite cake, and if my brother and I grew up, everyone else's slice would get smaller. The emperor opened his mouth, likely intending to tell me to pick one. But I didn't give him the chance. I flashed my most innocent, harmless smile and snatched the entire box right out of his hands. "Thank you for the 9 swords, Your Majesty," I shouted. I didn't know their full history yet, but I could tell from the elders' greedy expressions that these were high-quality goods. Adults might choose one, but as a kid, I wanted them all. The emperor started, his face pale, clearly wanting to clarify that he only meant for me to have one. But my ancestors were completely shameless. Before he could finish his sentence, they hit him with a wave of aggressive flattery. "His Majesty is so generous," one elder cried out. "Giving away the 9 heavens swords just like that. I'm so moved I could cry. If I were a woman, I'd marry him on the spot. Such a precious gift," another added, suppressing a smirk. "The Qin family can't possibly repay this. But then again, His Majesty is the Son of Heaven. He owns the 4 seas. Why would he care about these external objects? Talking about money would be an insult to his character." "Exactly," a third elder chimed in. "It's the thought that counts. From now on, the Qin family follows your lead, Your Majesty. If anyone speaks ill of you, we'll be the first to shut them down." Then, they looked at me. "Brat, where are your manners?" New to the emperor. I played along perfectly, hitting the ground and knocking my head 3 times in a kowtow so dramatic it looked like I was mourning at a funeral. Suddenly, a notification pinged in my head. *ding. Congratulations to the host for promoting the villain spirit. By openly robbing a rare divine weapon without paying, you have earned 1,000 villain points. I frowned internally. Openly robbing? Who was robbing? I was a good kid. He gave them to me. I sent a silent complaint to the system, telling it to watch its tone. The emperor looked like he was about to have a medical emergency. He realized my entire family lacked even a shred of dignity. And just as he was processing the loss of his swords, I looked up at him with those big, watery, innocent eyes again. "Your Majesty," I whispered, Have you heard of the tradition? When an elder meets a junior for the first time, they always give a meeting gift. The emperor nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. He had never seen anyone this thick-skinned. I believe there is such a rule, my ancestors added, clearly enjoying the chance to bleed a billionaire dry. The surrounding Qin family disciples were staring in awe. They had lived in the clan for years, but they realized they hadn't even begun to master the ultimate secret art of the Qin family. Pure, unadulterated shamelessness. Oh no, I started wailing dramatically. Is the leader of the strongest empire in the desolate valley really too stingy to give a kid a meeting gift? This is terrible. I could see the veins bulging in the emperor's forehead. If the elders weren't standing right there, he definitely would have strangled me. He looked like he regretted even waking up this morning. He had already lost the 9 heaven swords, and now I was shaking him down for more. To save his remaining dignity, he reached for his waist and unhooked a small jade gourd tied with golden silk. It glowed with a faint, divine light. The heavenly treasure gourd. The elder's eyes lit up again. This wasn't a weapon, it was a support item. Wearing it cleared the mind and prevented chi deviation during cultivation. It sped up training and, most importantly, allowed a practitioner to recover their spiritual energy rapidly during battle. It was a dream item for any cultivator, but the cost to make one was so high that even the Qin family only owned 5. Thank you, your majesty, I chirped, snatching the gourd before he could change his mind. Ding. System detected the host is eager to help others by taking care of the heavenly treasure gourd. You have earned 1,000 villain points. Now that was more like it. I liked the way the system was talking now. You're welcome, the emperor choked out. His smile was pained. The gourd was one of the cheapest things he had on him, and he wasn't about to hand over his actual top-tier battle gear to a 3-year-old. But then, he caught my eye again. I was staring at his belt with that same innocent look. His heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe it. 2 legendary treasures weren't enough to satisfy this kid's appetite? Even my ancestors were starting to feel a little embarrassed for him. They were already mentally calculating when they could take me to the imperial city to go door to door and visit all the other noble families. The Qin disciples watching were taking notes. They finally understood the truth. In the world of cultivation, your face is just an external object. You don't need it. Ding. Detected host has corrupted the Qin family disciples. Earned 200 villain points. My eyes lit up. I had just unlocked a whole new way to farm points. The emperor saw that look in my eyes and finally snapped. He didn't say another word. He turned into a streak of golden light and shot into the sky like a rocket. I just remembered I have urgent business in the capital, he roared from the clouds. Your Majesty, I screamed after him, cupping my hands around my mouth. I'll bring my little brother to visit you soon. Don't be too formal. You don't need to prepare anything big. Just a few Saint Grade or God Grade manuals will do. Oh, and maybe a dozen more of those gourds. I'm just a kid, I don't need much. In the distance, the golden streak of light wobbled violently, nearly falling out of the sky before disappearing into the horizon. I watched the Emperor's golden streak vanish into the clouds. The silence that followed was heavy. Every Qin family disciple was staring at me, their faces twitching with disbelief. I didn't care. I tossed my head back, letting my hair flow in the wind. I had to maintain my image as the #1 handsome boy in the barren valley. What are you all looking at? I asked, striking a pose. Haven't you ever seen a genius before? Suddenly, a shadow loomed over me. My father, Qin Tian, stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Before I could react, he snatched the small wooden box containing the 9 swords of the firmament right out of my hands. You're still young, son, he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. I'll keep this safe for you. I stared at my empty hands. Safe. He just wanted the legendary weapon for himself. Even the clan disciples looked embarrassed. Their great clan head was literally robbing his 3-year-old son. You say you love me, but you steal my treasures. I wailed. I turned on my acting skills, eyes welling with tears, and dove into the arms of one of the clan ancestors. You useless brat, the ancestor roared at my father. He kicked Qin Tian square in the backside and snatched the box back, handing it to me. It was a clear message to everyone. These swords belonged to me, and not even the clan head could touch them. Just then, the sky erupted. Thunder crashed, and the phantom of a dragon emperor dove straight into my mother's room. A few moments later, a young maid ran out, beaming. "It's a boy. Both mother and son are safe." I let out a long breath. My heart had been in my throat. I was terrified my new brother's protagonist aura would cause a disaster during his birth. I rushed inside to see him. The baby was cleaned up and wrapped in silk. I leaned in, comparing our faces. He looked exactly like our cheap father. Poor kid. At least I inherited our mother's legendary beauty. But beauty didn't matter right now. What mattered was that my little brother was finally out of the womb. I could finally hit him. The baby seemed to sense my presence. He became restless, squirming as if he wanted to scream, "Stay away from me." The ancestors frowned, sensing a mysterious, ancient energy radiating from him. Even with their thousands of years of experience, they couldn't figure out what it was. "Why isn't he crying?" I asked, looking innocent. "Is there something wrong with him?" The elders realized I was right. Most babies come out screaming, but he was silent. As they leaned in to check on him, I moved faster. Slap. The sound echoed through the room. I landed a heavy blow right on his tiny butt. A bright red handprint appeared instantly. I didn't hold back at all. The baby's eyes flew open, and he let out a piercing, ear-splitting wail. "Chin Feng, what are you doing?" my father yelled, rushing to scoop up the baby. "I was just worried about him," I said, looking heartbroken. Inside, I was dancing. Asterisk ding. Host slapped the child of destiny. Earned 100 points. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. Host made the child of destiny cry, causing him to lose his innate primordial chi, equivalent to 3 years of cultivation lost. Earned 30,000 points. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. Host disrupted the child of destiny's destiny. Earned 1 gotcha spin. Asterisk. I froze. Innate primordial chi? The system explained that every legendary genius is born with a breath of pure energy. If they hold it in, it jumpstarts their cultivation. By making him cry, I had forced him to vent that energy. I felt a pang of regret. If I had known that back when I was born, I wouldn't have spent my first minutes screaming like an idol. That's the difference between a protagonist and a villain, I guess. For the next few days, I watched him closely. I suspected he might be a reincarnated powerhouse like me. But he just ate, slept, and cried. He cried so much he was driving our father insane. My father looked like he had aged 10 years and definitely wasn't thinking about having a third child anymore. My mother, however, kept giving him a look that suggested she was only married to him to produce more sons for me to bully. That night, I sat in my own courtyard, focusing on my cultivation. I had reached the first level of the Kaiyuan realm, but I had hit a wall. My cultivation technique, the 33 Heavens creation art, was like a high-performance car with an old, weak engine. I needed to unlock the second level. "System," I whispered, "use the gotcha spin." A massive wheel appeared in my mind, spinning past legendary rewards, the Chaos Body, Supreme Bones, True Dragon Arts. It finally slowed down and clicked into place. Asterisk ding. Congratulations. You have pulled the heaven-slaying sword draw technique. Asterisk. A bolt of lightning struck my mind. My consciousness was pulled into a void. A man in black appeared. He didn't speak. He simply gripped his hilt and pulled. Clang. A flash of light divided the universe. It was cold, sharp, and absolutely terrifying. The strike was so fast it felt like it cut through time itself. When my consciousness returned to my body, I was drenched in sweat. It was the perfect technique. No flashy moves, just one strike to end a world. I knew how to do it now, but I looked at my tiny 3-year-old arms and sighed. I had the knowledge, but my body was still too weak to actually pull it off. I needed to get stronger, and fast. I didn't have time to waste. I needed to get stronger, and I needed to do it now. I called out to the system in my mind to exchange 30,000 villain points for a 1-month comprehension aura. A familiar, ethereal sensation washed over me. It felt like my soul was drifting out of my body. Everything about cultivation that had confused me before suddenly became crystal clear. It was like a fog had lifted from my mind. Right as I was sinking into this state, an old man appeared in my courtyard. It was the 10th ancestor of the Qin family. Technically, he was my great-grandfather. My actual grandfather had been missing for hundreds of years, gone on some training journey with zero news. My family still argued back and forth about whether we should hold a funeral for him or keep waiting. My dear great-grandson, your great-grandpa is here to see you. The 10th ancestor picked me up, his face beaming with affection. The family elders were obsessed with me. Ever since I broke through to the Kaiyuan realm on my own, they had been both thrilled and terrified. They were happy to have a genius in the family, but they were scared that I had cultivated without guidance. One wrong move, and I could have destroyed my own body. So, they sent the 10th ancestor to be my personal tutor. Honestly, I didn't think I needed him. My 33 Heavens creation art was the complete version, and every instruction was laid out perfectly. As for martial arts and movement techniques, I figured I'd rather just borrow my younger brother's, but for 2 days. No matter how hard a technique was, I could master it in 48 hours if I had enough villain points. A cultivator must never be arrogant, the 10th ancestor said, sensing my lack of interest. He decided it was time to knock me down a peg and show me that there was always someone better. He took a deep breath, centered his energy, and stomped his foot. Leaves flew into the air. He pressed his fingers together and pointed at a massive stone mountain in the garden. Asterisk swish. 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 Asterisk the leaves turned into deadly blades, slicing the 10-meter stone structure into pebbles. Do you see that? He asked proudly. That is the heaven tier technique, falling leaf strike. I practiced for over 10 years to master it. When I debuted in the martial world, I was famous. Before he could finish bragging, I copied his stance. I centered my energy, stomped my foot, and sent leaves swirling. I pointed my fingers at a stone table nearby. Swish! The leaves flew out like steel plates, embedding themselves deep into the stone. If my cultivation were higher, I would have shredded the table just like he did. The 10th ancestor said it took 10 years. I didn't see the difficulty. Maybe it was the 100-fold comprehension aura, or maybe this heaven-tier skill just wasn't that impressive compared to my system rewards. Either way, I was bored. I'd rather go hit my brother. The 10th ancestor stood there in dead silence. I could tell he was hurting inside. My comment about it being easy was a direct hit to his ego. He turned away, muttering to himself that he needed some quiet time. Asterisk ding. Host showed disrespect to an elder. Gained 100 villain points. Asterisk. I was confused. How was I disrespectful? The system replied instantly. Not listening to an elder's advice counts as disrespect. I rolled my eyes. Just because someone is old doesn't mean they're right. But hey, 100 points is 100 points. Just then, several other family elders rushed past my courtyard with serious expressions. They were heading toward my parents' place. Curious, I followed them. Inside the room, the elders were surrounding my younger brother, comparing him to ancient texts. After a few minutes, they couldn't hide their excitement anymore. They started laughing toward the sky. The Supreme Bone. It's true. This child is a natural-born Supreme. They were shouting about how this would restore the Qin family's glory. The 10th ancestor looked at me, then at my brother, and sighed. He felt like his entire life of cultivation was a joke compared to us two monsters. Time skipped forward. 5 years passed. I stood up and released a burst of spiritual energy, shattering the jade tub I was soaking in. I was 8 years old now, but I had the height of a 12-year-old and a body built like a predator. I was packed with lean muscle and explosive power. The first thing I did after my breakthrough was go find my brother. We shared the same parents and the same ancestors, but that didn't stop me from wanting to beat him up. For the past 5 years, I had used sparring as an excuse to grind him into the dirt. It was my main source of income. I had already racked up over 240,000 villain points. But my brother was getting harder to handle. Even though he was only at the 5th level of the Kaiyuan realm and I was at the 9th, he was putting up a real fight. That Supreme Bone was no joke. I asked the system how to reach the Great Perfection stage to stay ahead of him. The answer was simple. Buy a Great Perfection card for 1 million points. I have to hit him while he's still young, I muttered. The 10th ancestor watched me leave, rubbing his temples. He knew the house was about to become a chaotic mess again. But the elders didn't stop us. They liked the rivalry. It kept us both hungry and hardworking. As I walked through the estate, the other disciples greeted me with smiles. But as soon as they felt the unstable, terrifying aura radiating off me, their smiles froze. They knew exactly what was coming. I had really done it. I broke through to the transcendent realm. In the outside world, Most geniuses didn't reach this level until they were 15 or 16. By then, they were considered rising stars ready to make a name for themselves. But I was only 8. The Qin family disciples stood frozen, swallowing hard as they felt my aura. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they never would have believed a monster like me existed. I didn't care about their shock. I had a job to do. I needed to find my younger brother and beat him up. After 5 years of experience, I knew exactly where to look. I found him at the main gate of the estate. There he was, a little sprout of a boy, sleeping on a crooked-necked tree. I circled the tree, frowning. My brother, Qin Hao, loved sleeping here. If he were a normal kid, I'd just think he was lazy. But this was a protagonist we were talking about. In these stories, the most unremarkable spots usually held the greatest secrets or hidden legacies. Was there some ancient inheritance hidden in this tree? I stared at it for a long time, but saw nothing special. My gaze shifted to my sleeping brother. To anyone else, he looked like a picture of pure innocence. To me, he looked like a walking temptation, practically begging me to dig out his supreme bone. My original dream was to be a wealthy, lazy playboy who spent his days drinking and enjoying life. But because of this little monster, I was forced to work myself to the bone just to survive his future plot armor. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I raised my hand high. Smack. I landed a heavy hit right on his little butt. The kid jumped awake, startled. But when he saw it was me, he didn't get mad. He actually beamed and called out, "Brother." Even though I'd hit him 1,000 times, he still followed me around like a lost puppy. A wave of panic hit me. Everyone knows how this works. The warmer the childhood memories, the more tragic the death scene later. In these stories, anyone the protagonist loves usually ends up dead to fuel his character growth. I could almost see the future, him standing over my grave with a glowing halo, saying, "I'm here, big brother. Brother, let's go outside," Qin Hao said, looking at me with puppy dog eyes. I rolled my eyes. He really overestimated my freedom. As the future hopes of the Qin family, we were guarded 24 hours a day. I hadn't stepped foot outside the estate in 8 years. Not that I needed to. The Qin family estate was massive. It was basically a giant city. The Qin family was the #1 clan in the desolate valley. We had a population of 10 million, all living within these walls. Everyone, down to the servants, practiced martial arts. We were the true rulers of the Eastern Great Xia Empire. People here might not know the emperor's name, but they definitely knew the Qin family. Qin Hao grabbed my arm and shook it, trying to look pitiful. It didn't work on me. If he were a cute little sister, I might have folded, but he was just a brat. Still, I decided to give him a complete childhood experience. I nodded and told him to wait for me by the city gates while I went to tell our mother. "Great," he shouted, skipping away, completely unaware of how sinister the world, and his brother, could be. I watched him go, then immediately pivoted. I sprinted into the house, my face shifting from kind older brother to devious snitch. "Mother, second brother is running away from home," I yelled as I burst into the room where Yin Xia was sitting. A notification pinged in my head. Asterisk system detected host framing the child of destiny. Rewarding 200 villain points. Asterisk. The surrounding guards kept their faces blank. They were used to this. For 5 years, I had been setting my brother up. They probably already knew what was coming next. Sure enough, a few minutes later, my mother dragged Qin Hao back by the scruff of his neck like a wet kitten. She was fuming. I immediately switched back to my kind brother persona. I stepped forward, looking heartbroken. "Mother, please don't be angry. I was the one who promised to take him out. It wasn't his idea to run away." Qin Hao nodded frantically, looking at me with eyes full of gratitude. But the more I defended him, the less my mother believed it. She thought I was just being a good big brother and taking the blame to protect him. She looked at us, frustrated. We were twins, yet I was sensible and mature while he was a little troublemaker who needed a beating every 3 days. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" she lectured, her voice rising. She didn't notice me standing behind her, making a ridiculous face at Qin Hao. He was only 5. He couldn't handle the sudden humor. He burst out laughing right in the middle of her lecture. That was the final straw. My mother's anger exploded. I could practically see her trying to brainwash herself into staying calm. Asterisk, he's my son. I'm his mother. If I hit him, I'll just have to comfort him later. I almost died giving birth to him. It's my fault he's like this. I haven't taught him well. Asterisk. She took a deep breath. Spare the rod, spoil the child. She couldn't hold it back anymore. Mother, please. He's just a child, I cried out, rushing forward to stop her. As I did, I conveniently placed a willow branch right into her hand. Move aside, she snapped, grabbing the branch. I have to teach this brat a lesson today. The guards shifted slightly. They had expected me to hand her a feather duster, but the willow branch was a new touch. I stood back, waiting for the villain points to roll in, when suddenly, music echoed from the sky. A massive procession appeared in the clouds. 9 mountain-sized spirit beasts were pulling a luxurious carriage, followed by a small army of warriors riding flying beasts. The whole display was blindingly grand. I recognized them immediately. It was the Ling family from the city of Heaven's Heart. They were the absolute rulers of the Western Great Xia Empire. Unlike our family-based rule, they were like a powerful lordship that recruited experts from all over the world. They had arrived. The Ling family controlled the western regions of Great Xia with a 1,000,000-strong armored army. My mother, Yun Xie, shot Qin Hao one last warning glare. She decided to deal with him later and dragged us both toward the gates. The city bells rang out in a grand welcome. Hundreds of thousands of elite Qin disciples lined the streets, putting our family's power on full display for our guests. My mother dressed us in formal robes. We had to accompany my cheap father, Qin Tian, to greet them personally. Today, my dad wasn't his usual goofy self. He stood at the gates like an invincible god of war, his presence heavy and commanding. A middle-aged man in luxurious robes stepped down from the spirit beast carriage. He looked like a total old fox, shrewd and calculating. He rushed forward to hug my father with a smile that seemed a little too bright. Brother Qin, it's been years. I've missed you dearly, the man cried out. This was Lin Hao, the Lord of Heaven's Heart City. Brother Lin, I've missed you too. My father laughed heartily, though I couldn't tell how much of it was sincere. After some small talk, Lin Hao's eyes drifted to my brother and me. I knew why he had traveled thousands of miles. The Qin family wanted an alliance with Heaven's Heart City. They were here to pick one of us to get engaged to his precious daughter. The Great Xia royal family was panicking because my brother and I kept breaking ancient records. They were already rallying other clans to suppress us. We needed allies to survive. This is my eldest, Qin Feng, my father said, pride dripping from his voice. He has the potential of a great emperor. And this is my second son, Qin Hao. He possesses the unique supreme bone. Most families would be lucky to have one genius. My father had two. The supreme bone is recorded in history, but great emperor potential remains to be seen. A sharp voice interrupted. A young girl stepped out from behind Lin Hao. This was the little princess of Heaven's Heart, Lin Xiner. She was only 6 or 7, but she was already a stunning beauty with skin like snow and eyes like jade. Xiner, don't be rude. Lin Hao scolded, but the girl didn't care about manners. She looked at me with pure provocation. She snapped her fingers, summoning a calm-looking teenager about 14 years old. This is my new servant, Lin San, she said, her eyes challenging mine. Lin San, do you dare to fight him to prove his worth? Lin San, I looked at the kid. He didn't look like a common servant. He had the aura of a hidden dragon. The crowd started whispering immediately. Apparently, Lin San was famous. People called him a monster talent and predicted he would be the greatest swordsman in 100 years. Suddenly, a system notification chimed in my head. Asterisk ding. Found a child of fortune. Grade, epic, asterisk. My eyes lit up. I was thrilled. Because Qin Hao is my brother, I could never go all out against him. I was always worried about how my parents would react. It took me 5 years just to grind 240,000 villain points. But this guy? He wasn't family. I could beat him as much as I wanted. The parents shared an awkward laugh, but neither stopped the fight. Lin Hao wanted to make sure his daughter wasn't marrying a loser. My father wanted me to show off our family's strength. Even if I lost, I was only 8 and he was 14. But if I won, that would be a massive face gain for the Qin family. Fine, I'll play with him, I said. I let my aura explode. The ground trembled, and fallen leaves began to float around me. First stage of the Transcendent Realm. Lin Hao and his experts gasped. An 8-year-old Transcendent was unheard of, but what shocked them more was the way the leaves moved. It was the signature technique of the Qin family's 10th ancestor, falling leaves. Lin Hao finally understood why the emperor was so scared of us. If we grew up, the royal family was finished. Please advise me, Lin San said politely, bowing before the fight. He clearly overestimated my sense of honor. I never play fair, especially against a child of fortune who was 2 levels higher than me. Before he could even finish his sentence, I flicked my fingers. The floating leaves turned into razor-sharp blades, screaming through the air like a meat grinder. Hey, where's your sportsmanship? Lin Xiner screamed, outraged that I attacked without warning. Lin Sin didn't panic. He drew his sword in one smooth motion. His blade moved like moonlight on water, light and fluid. He struck the leaves, shattering them into dust. He moved through the storm of debris, his sword flashing with cold light. With one powerful swing, he broke my technique completely. He looked cool, but I saw the small cuts on his arms. His chest was heaving. That move took a lot out of him. Good opportunity. I followed the rule of killing them while they're down. I activated my phantom escape, blurring across the distance in a heartbeat. I didn't give him a second to breathe. I slammed my fist right into his face. Lin San let out a cry and went flying backward. Go, brother. You're the best. Qin Hao cheered, jumping up and down. His cheering only made Lin Xiner angrier as she screamed for Lin San to get up. Ding. Congratulations, host. You punched a child of fortune. Gained 200 villain points. I was pumped. I was ready to keep this up all day. But I underestimated Lin San's resilience. Before I could follow up, he stabilized his body and lunged forward like a streak of light. His sword glowed with a dark, watery sheen. Sword intent, my father shouted. The elders were stunned. Sword intent was something most cultivators only dreamed of. It changed everything. It meant his combat power just multiplied. This was bad. I felt the sheer power behind that strike. I wasn't about to meet it head-on. I twisted my body, dodging the blade by a hair's breadth, but Lin San had already recovered his rhythm. He was 2 minor stages higher than me, and with his sword intent, he moved like a gale of wind. His blade whipped out, leaving trails of sharp energy that locked onto me like a net. Even with my phantom escape, I felt like a small boat tossed in a massive storm. One wrong move, and I'd be capsized. Go, Lin San. Teach this brat a lesson. Lin Xiner cheered, clapping her hands and sticking her tongue out at my brother, Qin Hao. Brother, win. You can do it. Qin Hao's face was beet red as he screamed at the top of his lungs. The adults ignored the kids. They were too busy being stunned. Most people couldn't break into the Transcendent Realm by age 8, let alone master sword intent by 14. They realized they were witnessing a new era of geniuses. The world was about to be reshuffled. I didn't care about history or politics. I only cared about one thing. How to beat this kid and get my villain points. Damn. So this is what it feels like for a villain to be suppressed by a protagonist? I was being pushed back, unable to find an opening. The pressure was suffocating. I couldn't lose face here. I needed a trump card. System. Exchange for Volume 2 of Phantom Escape. I shouted in my head. Ding. Congratulations, host. You have spent 10,000 villain points. My heart bled. 10,000 points. Do you know how many times I'd have to bully my younger brother to make that back? My dream of reaching great perfection just got further away. I had to make Lin San pay for this. Suddenly, my body moved on its own, following the new patterns burned into my mind. I became like a wisp of smoke, flickering through the watery sword light. I glided back hundreds of meters with zero effort. What? The crowd gasped. They saw it. I had broken through mid-battle. My speed had doubled, and my footwork was now so mysterious they couldn't even track it. I dodged every single one of Lin San's strikes with ease. Good, good, good. My father, Qin Tian, roared with laughter. He looked like he wanted to grab a megaphone and scream it directly into Lin Hao's father's ear. My son has the poise of a great emperor. Lin San's expression turned dead serious. He knew he couldn't win without going all out. His robes began to flutter even though there was no wind. His sword hummed, the air around it tearing apart with a mournful cry. He was charging his ultimate move. I felt the shift in the air. I raised my hand toward the sky and shouted one thing. Sword come. A crisp hum echoed through the entire city. 9 streaks of light cut through the sky like falling stars. The 9 heavens swords. Lin Hao exclaimed. Everyone remembered the story now. 5 years ago, when the Emperor of Great Xia visited, the shameless, eldest son of the Qin family had tricked him out of these swords and a celestial gourd. People thought it was just a rumor. They didn't think I'd actually be thick-skinned enough to carry all 9 swords just to look cool. 9 swords unite. I formed a hand seal and pointed. The blade spun, kicking up a massive storm of dust. The sword intent grew sharp and violent, roaring like a tidal wave. When the dust settled, a single, chilling blade floated in front of me. This was the weapon of the heaven-slicing sword god from 10,000 years ago. It was one of the top 10 divine weapons in the entire valley. Lin San's eyes burned with greed. His breathing became heavy. He had inherited the sword god's techniques, but he didn't have the actual swords. If he could get his hands on these, he'd be unstoppable. But he knew better than to try a robbery in the middle of the Qin estate. Even with a divine sword, you won't beat me, Lin San growled, his confidence returning. He lunged through the dust. A brilliant flash of light cut through the void. It was the heaven-slicing sword script, a technique that could supposedly kill gods and Buddhas alike. My father's face went pale. He moved to stop the fight, worried I couldn't handle a god-tier technique at age 8. But I was already in position. I gripped the hilt, my eyes cold. Heaven-slicing drawl clang. A single, blinding arc of light erupted. It was fast, elegant, and terrifying. It felt like it could split the sky in two. No flashy tricks, just pure, absolute power. Boom. The 2 sword lights collided, creating a shockwave that sent a storm of energy rippling outward. Qin Hao and Lin Xiner had to grab onto their parents' clothes just to avoid being blown away. Lin San's eyes widened in disbelief. How is this possible? He was older, he had the inheritance, and he had sword intent. He thought beating an 8-year-old would be easy. But he was learning the hard way that my sword was different. Crack! The sword in Lin San's hand shattered. It couldn't handle the sharpness of my divine blade. He had the technique, but I had the draw. He had sword intent, but I had the better weapon. He was 2 levels higher, but I had the 10-fold boost of a great emperor's physique and a gourd that kept my energy full. I couldn't lose. Lin San stood there, trembling. He had always been the one to win against stronger opponents. He had built a heart of invincibility. But today, that heart cracked. He began to doubt everything. Ding. Congratulations, host. You have cracked the Chosen One's heart of invincibility. Gained 100,000 villain points. One crack in his heart was worth 100,000 points. If I actually stabbed him in the chest, I'd be a billionaire in minutes. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my fighting spirit burning hotter than ever. I didn't give him a chance to breathe. I moved like a ghost, my phantom escape technique blurring my silhouette as I lunged forward. My divine sword hummed, aiming straight for Lin San's heart. They say if you love someone, you should give them your heart, but I preferred taking his. Lin San might have been building a heart of invincibility, but at the end of the day, he was just a 13-year-old kid. I had just shattered his confidence, and his rhythm was a complete mess. He stumbled back, his defense falling apart. Every time my blade left a new mark on his body, my love for him grew. Asterisk ding. Congratulations, host. You wounded the Chosen One. Gained 500 villain points. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. Congratulations, host. You wounded the Chosen One. Gained 500 villain points. Asterisk. I was having the time of my life. I couldn't exactly go all out against my little brother, Qin Hao, so I had never fought this hard before. It was satisfying. My brother is the best. Qin Hao cheered from the sidelines, his little head held high. He looked like he wanted to announce to the whole world that I was his big brother. Lin Xiner, on the other hand, was stomping her feet in a rage. She looked like she wanted to rush up and punch me, but my mother, Yinxia, caught her and pulled her into a hug. My mom seemed to really like the little girl. The match is decided. Brother Qin, your son truly has the bearing of a great emperor, Lin Hao said with a laugh. Just as I was about to land a finishing blow to Lin San's chest, Lin Hao waved his hand. A powerful force slammed into my path, and he pulled Lin San back to safety. I clicked my tongue in annoyance. Lin San was supposed to be the greatest swordsman of the next century. Of course, his father wasn't going to let me turn him into a pincushion. I glared at Lin Hao. He had just taken away my favorite point farming machine. Still, I didn't push it. I knew how these chosen ones worked. They were creepy. If I pushed too hard, some ancient protector would probably fall out of the sky to save him. It was better to quit while I was ahead and avoid the headache. My father, Qin Tian, let out a booming laugh. Hearing someone praise his eldest son made him glow with pride. He knew the alliance and the marriage proposal were now practically guaranteed. The welcoming ceremony continued. My father led Lin Hao into the heart of the Qin family city. As they walked past rows of elite disciples with high cultivation levels, I saw the envy in Lin Hao's eyes. I knew what he was thinking. If he had the choice, he'd rather spend resources on his own bloodline than on an outsider, no matter how talented, unless that outsider was absolutely loyal. And loyalty? That was a gamble no one liked to make. Soon, the parents sat down to discuss the marriage. Everyone assumed Lin Hao would pick me, especially after the display I just put on. But to everyone's shock, he chose my brother, Qin Hao, who had spent the whole time just watching the fight. What the? I muttered under my breath. I was stunned. These chosen ones, and their luck made no sense at all. I fought like a tiger, yet the marriage proposal went to the kid sitting on the sidelines. My parents looked at each other, equally surprised. I had proven my strength, and at 8 years old, my power was terrifying. Qin Hao had a supreme bone, sure, but it hadn't been activated yet. His actual combat strength was a mystery. Lin Hao just smiled, offering no explanation. But he wasn't acting randomly. He had weighed the risks. He knew we were twins, and our talents were likely similar. If I could break records, Qin Hao likely could too. But more importantly, there were rumors floating around the barren realm. People whispered that the blood moon omen born 8 years ago was me. The great Xia imperial family saw me as a major threat. Investing in me was too risky. Investing in Qin Hao was safer. If the Qin family ever fell, Qin Hao would have no choice but to stand with their city. My father didn't push for answers. His goal was the alliance. As long as the rulers of the East and West joined forces, even the imperial family would have to think twice before attacking. If this bought us enough time for me and my brother to grow up, the Qin family would win. And so, behind closed doors and polite smiles, a marriage of convenience was settled. The kids, however, knew nothing about this. I was stuck walking through the city with Qin Hao, Lin Xianer, and a very grumpy Lin San. Being a villain character sandwiched between two epic-tier, chosen ones made my skin crawl. Even with millions of Qin family guards around us, I felt unsafe. I was terrified their protagonist halos would suddenly activate and get us all killed in some freak accident. Wow, it's so lively here, Lin Xianer shouted. We had reached the market district. This wasn't a place for vegetables and meat. It was a cultivator's market. People were selling spirit herbs, pills, and magical artifacts. Because the Qin family ruled the East, the city was incredibly safe, attracting traders from all over. Suddenly, Qin Hao and Lin San both froze. Their eyes lit up at the exact same time, staring at a battered, rusty little tripod sitting on a nearby stall. I perked up instantly. I realized I had been looking at this all wrong. Instead of worrying about being cursed by their luck, I should use their chosen one instincts to find treasure. If both of them were staring at a piece of junk, that junk was definitely a divine artifact. I saw it first, Qin Hao shouted. No, I saw it first. Lin San barked back. They glared at each other, neither willing to back down. While they were busy arguing, I stepped forward like a shark. I looked at the stall owner and asked for the price. It's usually 1,000 spirit stones, the vendor said nervously, watching my face for any sign of anger. But for the young master, how about 888? He looked ready to drop the price even lower if I so much as blinked. In this city, nobody wanted to offend the Qin family. Passers-by stopped to stare, whispering that the vendor was crazy. A single spirit stone could feed a commoner for a lifetime, and 888 was a fortune. But the vendor wasn't trying to scam me. He knew the history of that tripod. He had been a leader in a gang of 100,000 men. They had found an ancient ruin and sacrificed almost every single member to get inside. When they finally reached the center, there were no piles of gold, only this rusty tripod on a stone pedestal. His leader had died on the spot, either from his wounds or from the sheer disappointment. The vendor was the only survivor. 100,000 lives had been traded for this one little pot. 888 spirit stones was a basement-level price. I didn't want to give anyone a chance to change their mind. Fine, 888. I'll take it, I said quickly. I told the vendor to go to the Qin estate to collect the gold. As the eldest young master of the Qin family, the most powerful clan in the desolate valley, it wouldn't make sense for me to carry pocket change. The vendor bowed repeatedly, thanking me with a grin that split his face. He handed over the rusty tripod immediately. Linson stood there, mouth agape. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He couldn't believe I'd just dropped a fortune on a piece of junk without even inspecting it or haggling. To him, I was just a rich kid being reckless. But deep down, he felt a pang of loss. He didn't know what the tripod was, but his instincts told him it was special. His intuition had saved his life 1,000 times, and right now, it was screaming that he'd missed out. A notification chimed in my head. The system congratulated me for sabotaging the Chosen One's opportunity. I had earned a free lucky draw. I looked at the tripod in my hands. It looked like trash. No matter how hard I stared, I couldn't see anything divine about it. I felt a surge of annoyance. Why did the protagonists get to sense treasures with their gut while I, the villain, just saw a rusty pot? It wasn't fair. Brother, please, give it to me. Qinhao started tugging on my arm again. He tried to look cute, putting on his best, sad little brother face. Usually, I never fell for his acts. If it were my little sister, I might have folded, but not for him. However, since I couldn't figure out how to use this thing, I realized I could use my brother as a tool to activate it. All right, I said, acting very serious. I just paid 888 stones for this. Since I'm your brother, I'll cover most of it. You just pay me 800, and I'll let you play with it for a few days. Deal. Qinhao's brain clearly wasn't firing on all cylinders. He beamed at me and pulled out a storage bag filled with all the New Year's money he'd saved over the years. I had been eyeing that bag for a long time. Within seconds, I had scammed my own brother out of 800 spirit stones. The bystanders were speechless. They looked at Qinhao like he was the dumbest kid on earth. Honestly, if he had a kindergarten diploma, he wouldn't have fallen for that. Another chime rang in my head. The system rewarded me with 500 villain points for deceiving an ignorant chosen one. I tucked the money away, feeling great, and handed the tripod to Qinhao. I figured once he accidentally activated its true power, I'd just take it back. Qinhao didn't feel cheated at all. In fact, he thought he'd gotten a bargain. He did the math in his head. I paid 3/8. He only paid 1/8. In his mind, he was a genius. I looked at my stupid little brother and sighed. I couldn't understand how a high IQ villain like me was supposed to be defeated by someone this dense. Is that thing actually useful? Lin Xiner asked, leaning in curiously. Qinhao pulled the tripod away and hid it in his robes immediately. He treated her like a thief, showing zero respect to his future wife. Lin Xiner stomped her foot in rage. As the little princess of Sky Heart City, she wasn't used to being ignored. Fine. I don't even want it, she snapped. Lin San, let's go. She was a classic proud little lady. She didn't know how to beg. She turned and kept walking through the market, and I followed right behind them. I wasn't leaving. I needed to keep a close eye on Lin San's reactions to find more loot. Lin San felt a chill run down his spine. He looked back at me, his face pale. He'd heard rumors about noble heirs having strange hobbies. He thought I was staring at him because I liked tender, young servants. The more I followed, the more convinced he became that I was a predator. To prove his theory, every time his eyes lingered on an item for more than 2 seconds, I stepped in and bought it instantly. I was like a domineering CEO on a shopping spree with a trophy wife, buying everything in sight. I looked at the pile of stuff I'd bought and frowned. None of it felt as powerful as the tripod. Still, the system notifications kept rolling in. 300 points for a celestial herb. 300 for a rare pill. They were good items, but I wanted more lucky draws. For the next few days, I dragged Lin Sin all over the market, rain or shine. The poor guy was terrified. He couldn't sleep. clutching his sword at night to protect his virtue. He wanted to be a top-tier servant, not a nobleman's plaything. Meanwhile, my reputation in the city reached a fever pitch. People whispered about my earthly genius status. They'd heard I hit the transcendent realm at age 8, mastered complex formations, and defeated a sword god successor with a single strike. Now, seeing me pick out treasures with 100% accuracy, they were floored. They thought I had decades of hidden knowledge. Finally, the day came for the Qin and Lin families to announce the marriage alliance. It was time for Lin Hao to take his people back to Sky Heart City. "Brother Qin, I suppose this is goodbye," Lin Hao said, sounding genuinely sad to leave. My father, Qin Tian, was just as emotional. He walked with them for miles before finally stopping. I stood there, watching Lin San leave with a heavy heart. My human treasure detector was walking away. Even though I'd only found one divine tripod through him, the other treasures had made me a fortune. Lin San saw my lingering gaze and shuddered. He couldn't wait to get away from me. He scrambled into the carriage, terrified that if he stayed any longer, I'd try to keep him forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lin San had shown me the true joy of being a villain. In just a few days, I'd squeezed 15,000 villain points out of him and earned a lucky draw. My little brother just couldn't provide that kind of thrill. I almost wanted to run away from home just to follow Lin San. But for now, I decided to focus on my reward. It was time to see what I'd won. I shook my head, clearing my mind, and called out to the system. With a loud whirl, the massive prize wheel appeared before my eyes again. The slots were packed with legendary rewards: the Heavenly Tyrant body, the Saintly Fighting body, the Chaos body, and even the True Dragon secret art. I hit the draw button. Asterisk ding. Congratulations, host. You have drawn a god-level Buddhist technique. Great mighty heavenly dragon. Asterisk. A thunderclap exploded in my mind. It felt like my soul had been ripped from my body and tossed into another world. Above me, 100-meter-long golden dragon circled the sky, its roar vibrating through the very air. Everywhere it passed, the earth cracked and the heavens trembled. Before I could even react, the dragon dived straight at me, crashing into my chest. I snapped awake, drenched in cold sweat. I looked down and saw a golden dragon tattoo coiled across my skin. Knowledge flooded my brain. I now knew how to channel this power. The great mighty heavenly dragon wasn't just raw strength. It dealt double damage to the demon race. It was their ultimate nightmare. It also boosted my physical defense and gave me the ability to tell man from demon with a single glance. Suddenly, my door creaked open. My younger brother, Qin Hao, poked his little head inside. Seeing I was still awake, he grinned, hugged his tiny pillow, and climbed onto my bed with his bare feet. He announced he was sleeping with me tonight. I stared at him, speechless. Usually, it's a little sister who comes to her brother when she's scared. Why did I end up with a younger brother who happened to be a chosen one? He fell asleep instantly, looking so peaceful that I felt like he was mocking me. It was like he was waving his supreme bone in my face, completely disrespecting my status as a villain. Meanwhile, in the Great Xia Imperial Palace, the atmosphere was suffocating. The emperor sat on his throne during the morning court, surrounded by his civil and military officials. The news of the alliance between the Qin family and Sky Heart City had hit them like a bomb. They had also heard about my exploits, how I'd reached the transcendent realm at age 8, created my own sword technique, and defeated the successor of the sword god. The emperor's advisors were split. One faction shouted for war, arguing that the Qin family didn't respect the throne and needed to be wiped out before the alliance solidified. The other faction begged for peace, pointing out that the Qin family and Sky Heart City weren't made of paper. If we fought, the neighboring music empire would just wait for us to weaken ourselves and then invade. The emperor looked down at his bickering ministers, feeling the weight of his years. He knew the problem. The Qin family had 2 geniuses growing at a terrifying rate, while the imperial family had none. The tides were changing, and he was the old wave being pushed out. Back at the estate, I sat cross-legged in my courtyard, surrounded by thick spiritual energy. Ever since I broke through to the transcendent realm, my cultivation technique, the 33 Heavens creation art, had started to lag behind. I didn't hesitate. I dropped 30,000 villain points to activate a 1-month enlightenment aura to master the third heaven stage. My ancestor stood nearby, his face pale with shock. He could feel my body changing. As the technique reached a deeper level, my physical form became tougher, gifted with an insane self-healing ability. I wasn't immortal yet, but regrowing a lost limb wouldn't be a problem. The ancestor had never seen anything like it. He wondered what kind of heavenly laws I had tapped into. Boom. A muffled sound erupted from within my body. Golden runes flared around me, and my aura surged. I hadn't just mastered the third heaven. I had broken through to the second level of the transcendent realm. A monster, the ancestor muttered. Suddenly, a series of bells chimed, echoing through the entire Qin city. The sound made everyone freeze. These were the emergency bells, silent for hundreds of years. They meant the family was facing a crisis of life and death. Every clansman had to prepare for total war. The ancestor's expression turned grim, and he vanished in a flash of white light. A crisis. I stood up, stretching my limbs. I bet this has something to do with my little brother. I started looking for Qin Hao, mostly so I could find an excuse to smack his butt. I never wanted this. My dream was to be a useless, rich playboy living a life of luxury and excess. But because of this little kid and his destiny, I had to work myself to the bone just to survive. Now, the whole clan was at risk. If I didn't vent some frustration on him, I'd never hear the end of it. In the main hall, my father, Qin Tian, sat at the head of the table. Below him were the leaders of the 13 branches of the Qin family, known to the world as the 13 Protectors. Our spies in the palace just sent word, my father said, his voice heavy. The emperor has made his choice. He's moving against us. One burly leader slammed his fist on the table, his eyes burning with excitement. Let them come. My blade has been thirsty for too long. Another leader, a scholar, frowned. It makes no sense. With the music empire watching us, a civil war is suicide. It will only benefit our enemies. The emperor is cutting off his own arm to save his body, my father replied. He knows that once the Qin brothers grow up, we will replace him. He'd rather rule half a broken kingdom than lose his throne to us. He's going for a lightning strike to finish us quickly. The 13 leaders fell silent. They knew there was no turning back now. The war wasn't just coming. It was already here. The emperor wasn't stupid. Before he could launch an all-out war, he had to secure the support of the other great noble families. He'd have to promise them massive benefits to get them to risk their lives. That meant we had a window of time. War wasn't starting today, but it was coming, and we had to prepare. I could feel the change in the air at the Qin estate. It was heavy, like the suffocating pressure before a massive storm. Usually, the Qin family members walked with confident smiles. Now, their faces were stone cold. The streets were no longer filled with beautiful young women or bustling life. Instead, I saw rows of silent, armored warriors. I wondered if we could actually win. I wasn't just some naive 3-year-old. I knew the stakes. Even though the Qin family had allied with the City of Heaven's Heart and controlled half the empire, the emperor and his coalition of noble families were no pushovers. Even a victory would leave us weak. Perfect prey for the music empire watching from the borders. But there was a bigger problem, my little brother. Everyone knows how chosen ones work. They don't need a powerful family. In fact, if they start in one, that family usually gets wiped out or the hero gets exiled, so they can grow stronger through suffering. Looking at the tropes, our chances of survival were basically zero. Part of me thought about running away. But then I looked around at my family. These were my people, my flesh and blood. I couldn't just leave them to die. I shook the thought out of my head and started brainstorming a way to flip the script. The best solution was my full-level red-haired monster trump card. But then a spark of inspiration hit me. I remembered the system task: dig out your younger brother's supreme bone. Maybe I could do it in a way that actually saved everyone. I headed toward the Qin family ancestral hall. It was a solemn place, housing the spirit tablets of over 100,000 ancestors who had died fighting for our name. Inside, a white-haired old man sat on a prayer mat. This was our first ancestor. Behind him stood 9 other ancestors and my father, Qin Tian. That is the situation, first ancestor, my father said, kneeling respectfully. We are prepared to fight to the death. Ancestors, wait, I shouted, my tiny legs carrying me into the hall. Feng get out, my father hissed, looking panicked. To shout in the ancestral hall and question the first ancestor was a massive breach of etiquette. Shut up, the first ancestor barked, but he wasn't looking at me with anger. He silenced my father and then turned to me with a warm smile, beckoning me over. My father looked incredibly hurt. We were both his descendants, but the favoritism was blatant. Probably because I always brought the old man snacks, while everyone else only came to him when they wanted to learn how to fight. Feng why do you say we shouldn't fight? The first ancestor asked dotingly. I put on my most serious face. Only fools think war is the only way to win. If we win, we lose our strength. If we lose our honor. The other ancestors all shifted their gaze to my father, as if to say, he's talking about you, the current clan head. My father's eye twitched. He looked like he wanted to swear, but didn't dare. Go on, the first ancestor said, genuinely curious. How do we win without a war? The emperor won't stop until he feels safe. The whole problem is me and my brother, I explained confidently. Qin Hao's birth broke the balance. The emperor feels threatened. If we can hide our talents and give him a reason to stand down, the war loses its purpose. The ancestors looked disappointed. That's child's logic, one muttered. The emperor won't stop unless we are dead or crippled. Exactly, I said, my voice dropping an octave. We cripple him. I pulled out a yellowed ancient book I'd traded from the system. It detailed rare physical constitutions, specifically the supreme bone. I pointed to a specific section, the correct way to activate the supreme bone, extraction and rebirth. Dig it out to break and then rebuild? The ancestors gasped. They were horrified. Usually, a family would protect a supreme bone with their lives. Who would be cruel enough to dig it out of their own child? The first ancestor went silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. This method, it's viable. I object, my father screamed. Howard is only a baby. He can't handle that kind of pain. To become a true supreme, a bone isn't enough, the first ancestor said calmly. He needs grand perseverance and a legendary spirit. Perhaps this is destiny. My father understood the logic, but as a parent, he couldn't stomach it. The first ancestor ignored him and looked at me. If Howard hides his talent by losing his bone, how will you hide yours? How will you hide your emperor's talent? I stood tall, looking like a martyr. The plan is simple. I, the eldest son, will grow jealous of my brother's talent. I will personally dig out his supreme bone to take it for myself. When the family discovers my crime, the ancestors will fly into a rage. You will strip me of my name and exile me forever. You'll even put a kill order on my head to show the world the Qin family doesn't tolerate such evil. The hall went dead silent. They couldn't believe an 8-year-old was saying this. I wasn't just being cruel to my brother. I was being suicidal toward myself. If Qin Hao suffered physical pain, I would suffer both physical and mental torture. I'd be branded a traitor, lose my home, and be hunted by the entire world until the day my brother grew strong enough to clear my name. Assuming I survived that long. No, my father cried out. He was shaking. I won't allow it. One son living in exile, hated by the world, and the other suffering in agony? No parent could wish for this. To play the villain and be cursed by history for the sake of the family, I said, looking incredibly noble while secretly thinking about my red-haired monster backup plan. I am willing. I stood tall, chest out, looking so heroic I almost moved myself to tears. My short speech, barely a few sentences long, left the ancestors, men who had lived for thousands of years, speechless. I was only 8 years old, a child. Yet here I was, ready to shoulder the infamy of the world and ignore my father's pain to save the clan from war. If the Qin family had descendants like this, how could they not prosper? A mechanical chime rang in my head. Asterisk ding. Such a hypocritical villain. You deserve a round of applause. Congratulations, host, you have obtained a portable storage space. Asterisk. I immediately checked the space. It was massive, stocked with about 1,000 bottles of various pills and supplies. It was the ultimate starter kit for traveling, killing, and arson. Old Kai struggled to maintain his composure, his voice trembling. The ancestor knows you are a good child, he whispered. But do you understand what you will face? There is no turning back. I have no regrets. I said, my eyes clear and firm. A sword's edge is sharpened by the grindstone. The fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Without the storm, how can one see the rainbow? Deep down, my internal monologue was screaming. 5 years. Do you know how I've spent these 5 years? Stop talking and let me dig out the bone already. I need to finish the mission. I want the invincible double pupils. I want to leave this beginner village and find some pretty girls. Fine. Old Kai finally choked out. It sounded like the word took every ounce of his strength. He knew my plan was the best way to minimize the clan's losses. Even in the worst-case scenario, only I would be sacrificed. Old Kai, I beg you. My father, Qin Tian, cried out. He dropped to his knees, his forehead hitting the floor. He couldn't stand the thought of me being hunted while he had to pretend he didn't care. It was too cruel for a father. I walked over and helped my cheap dad up. For the first time in 8 years, I spoke from the heart. Father, don't worry. I will come back safely. It was a promise. I would return one day to personally help him out. Night fell, and a heavy silence draped over the Qin estate. The emergency war bells had rung earlier, and all nighttime activities were canceled. Everyone was frantically cultivating, knowing only the strong would survive the coming conflict. I pushed open the door to my brother's room. In the faint moonlight, I saw my younger brother, Qin Hao, curled up and sleeping soundly, clutching his small bronze tripod. He looked so innocent it was almost hard to watch. Brother is doing this for your own good, I told myself. Digging out his supreme bone was the only way to save the clan's strength. It would force him to grow through hardship, and more importantly, it would finish my mission. Plus, my dad would finally stop calling me an emperor's talent. It was a win-win. Forgive me, my foolish little brother, I whispered. Qin Hao rubbed his eyes and woke up. He saw me standing by his bed and started to smile, ready to jump into my arms. Before he could move, a sharp, agonizing pain exploded in his chest. He looked down and saw my hand buried deep in his torso. His eyes filled with disbelief. I wasn't his smiling big brother anymore. I was a cold, heartless stranger. I'll be taking this supreme bone, I said, hardening my heart. I pulled the bone from his body with a wet tear. Ding. Congratulations, host, for wounding the child of destiny. Gained 80,000 villain points. Ding. Supreme bone extracted. Destiny interrupted. Gained 1 gotcha spin. Ding. Epic mission. Destined villain complete. Reward. Invincible double pupils. My vision blurred as my eyes began to transform. My pupils split into 2, glowing with a light that could see through the very essence of the world. I could now toggle them on or off to look like a normal human. The small tripod slipped from Qin Hao's hand and clattered to the floor. Through my new eyes, the tripod looked different. I could see a faint, weakened soul residing inside it. The classic old man mentor that every protagonist gets. Qin Hao struggled on the bed, his face pale, refusing to believe I could do this to him. But reality didn't care about his feelings. I turned and walked away without looking back. I didn't take the tripod. I didn't care if the old man inside would serve me. My system was far more powerful than any ghost. I'd leave it for my brother. A bone in exchange for a legendary mentor was a fair trade. As I stepped out, a sigh echoed from the tripod. The path of the double pupils is invincible. Why borrow another's bone? A soft light then radiated from the vessel, wrapping around Qin Hao to heal his wounds. Meanwhile, in my parents' room, my mother, Yun Xia, was hysterical. No, we can't do this, she sobbed, clutching my father. She couldn't bear the thought of her 8-year-old son suffering in exile, hated by his own brother. We have to believe in him, Qin Tian said, his voice strained as he held her tight. As the clan head, he couldn't watch his people die in a hopeless war. The Qin family had to hide now, so they could soar later. Outside their door, I dropped to my knees and kowtowed 3 times. The sound of my head hitting the floor echoed in the hallway. "Feng-er," my mother shrieked. She lunged for the door, but my father held her back. If they saw me now, the plan would crumble. "Father, mother, I'm leaving," I said. I stood up and walked toward the exit of the estate. Behind me, I could hear my mother's heart-wrenching cries. I reached the main gates and felt the cool night breeze. I looked back at the home where I had spent 8 years. I had felt real warmth here. To protect that warmth, I had to go. Desolate Valley, here I come. Pretty girls, wait for me. I stopped suddenly, staring at a crooked tree by the gate. Before, it looked like nothing. But now, with my double pupils, I saw a terrifying, ancient energy pulsating deep within its wood. The crooked tree looked like it didn't belong to this world. It felt like something that had traveled through hundreds of eras just to stand there. I stared at the supreme drum in my hand and sighed. Compared to the old man in the tripod and this mysterious tree, my drum felt like a cheap toy. Suddenly, the old ancestor's voice echoed in my mind through a telepathic transmission. Child, dawn is coming. The Qin family's hunt for you will soon spread across the desolate valley. Where do you plan to go? I'm going to the music dynasty. I thought back, looking toward the horizon with mock determination. I told him I wanted to go to the most dangerous place. Ever since their reforms a century ago, the music dynasty had changed. They didn't follow the old imperial rules. They had a system where the most capable people led. As a traitor to the Qin family, I figured they'd be very interested in me. Besides, the music dynasty was growing stronger and would eventually challenge the Great Xia Empire. If I went there as a mole, I could secure the Qin family's future. The fact that 3 of the 4 beauties of the desolate valley lived there had absolutely nothing to do with my decision. I wasn't interested in that at all. You must stay alive, the old ancestor replied, his voice thick with emotion. You must come back. He was clearly moved. I was only 8 years old, yet I was sacrificing everything for the clan. A notification pinged in my head. Ding! Such a hypocritical villain. You deserve a round of applause. Congratulations, host. Your storage space has doubled. I rolled my eyes mentally. Hypocritical? I was the hope of the Qin family. I told the system to shut up if it didn't have anything nice to say. Back at the Qin estate, the silence of the night was shattered by screams. Help! Someone come quickly. The second young master has been attacked. The news spread like wildfire. The entire clan thought the Great Xia royals had launched a sneak attack. They grabbed their weapons, ready to tear the intruder apart. But when they saw Qin Hao, their anger turned into pure horror. Someone had reached into a 5-year-old boy and ripped out his supreme bone. It wasn't just cruel, it was an attempt to destroy the family's future. Then, the name of the culprit came out. Everyone froze. Qin Feng. It couldn't be. Everyone knew the eldest young master was polite, hardworking, and brilliant. He was the perfect heir. How could he do something so barbaric to his own brother? The disciples shook their heads, refusing to believe it. It was him, that rebellious son, my father, Qin Tian roared. His face was a mask of agony and rage. His body trembled uncontrollably. He had a happy family, but because of the Great Xia Empire, he had to watch his 8-year-old son go into exile and his 5-year-old suffer the pain of losing a bone. The pressure was too much. My father coughed up a spray of bright red blood and collapsed. As the clan head, he carried a burden no one else could see. The elders rushed to him, finally realizing the truth. If their powerful leader was driven to spitting blood, it had to be true. Qin Feng had really done it. The second ancestor's voice boomed across the estate. Qin Feng was consumed by jealousy. He stole the supreme bone for himself and attacked the guards to flee. In the name of the second ancestor, I hereby expel Qin Feng from the clan. A hunt is now active. Kill him on sight. The clan was in shock. With Qin Hao's bone gone and Qin Feng exiled, the family had lost both their geniuses. But the second ancestor stood firm, even though his voice shook. He was saying the most dishonest words of his life. If I wasn't fit to be a Qin disciple, then no one was. As the sun began to rise, the ancestors stood on the highest tower of the estate. They watched my small silhouette fading into the distance. I was carrying the hopes of the entire clan on my shoulders. I was only 8, dancing on the edge of a knife, where one wrong move meant falling into the abyss. Isn't this too cruel? The old ancestor whispered, his eyes red. He's just a child. Great talents are forged in hardship, the second ancestor replied, trying to comfort the others. He isn't a normal child. He will return with glory. Remember, he was born under a blood moon. The news hit the desolate valley like a massive boulder dropped into a still pond. The story of the jealous older brother who mutilated his sibling spread everywhere. It reached the ears of the Great Xia Emperor, who immediately called an emergency meeting with his officials. "Is this real? Or is it a trick by the Qin family?" the emperor asked. "It's confirmed," a minister replied. "Qin Hao's bone is gone. Qin Tian is bedridden and coughing blood. The eldest son is a wanted man." The officials laughed. The two threats to the empire were gone, one crippled, one a fugitive. They thought the war was over before it even started. Some argued that I was still a threat because I had the bone now, but the emperor just shook his head. He believed that the moment I stole that bone, I had lost my invincible heart. To him, I was no longer a genius, just a desperate thief who would never reach the top. He sat back on his throne, feeling like he had already won. The emperor of Great Xia couldn't contain himself. He burst into a fit of laughter, feeling like the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. To him, the two greatest threats to his throne were gone. One genius was crippled, and the other had fallen from grace to become a common thief. The imperial bloodline was safe, and his reign remained supreme. He was so overjoyed that he decided to select a new concubine just to celebrate the occasion. Meanwhile, I was far away from the palace, leisurely riding my little donkey on the road toward the music dynasty. I wasn't worried about the emperor's laughter. I was looking at my system screen. I had finally saved up enough. My total sat at 1,156,500 villain points. Without hesitation, I dropped 1,000,000 points to exchange for the Great Perfection Mirror. A crisp notification rang in my head. The system confirmed the purchase of the Great Perfection 100% compatibility card. I used it immediately, and my 33 Heavens creation technique reached a perfect level of mastery. It felt like a bolt of lightning struck my brain. I slipped into a trance, my consciousness expanding until I could clearly sense the very laws of heaven and earth. My understanding of the technique deepened instantly. To put it simply, I used to only be able to tap into 60% of my true power. Now, I could use every bit of it. It was a massive leap in strength. I snapped back to reality and let out a long breath. So this was how it felt to be a child of destiny. I felt incredible. If I had to face Lin San again, I was confident I could beat him so badly his own mother wouldn't recognize him, and I wouldn't even need to use my ultimate draw sword technique to do it. Just as I was enjoying the moment, a sinister, cackling laugh echoed from the road ahead. "Little girl, don't be afraid," a rough voice shouted. "Just let us brothers have some fun with you, and we'll let you go. How about it?" I blinked, stunned. Was this a hero saves the beauty scenario? I had to laugh. Was this really a perk I got to enjoy as a villain? I hopped off my donkey and blurred through the air, landing on a tree branch hundreds of meters away to get a better look. Down below, a group of burly thugs had surrounded a young girl in purple. She was stunning, with delicate features and a bright, moving beauty. Her violet dress shimmered like flowing moonlight against the dirt road, and the slit in her skirt revealed her slender, porcelain-white legs. My heart nearly skipped a beat. Her outfit reminded me so much of the modern styles back on Earth. In the 8 years since I'd been reincarnated into this fantasy world, I hadn't seen anything like it. She looked like she stepped right out of a high-end dance video. The girl moved first. She struck out with a palm technique that looked like Tai Chi, but it lacked power. It only pushed one of the thugs back 2 steps without doing any real damage. She was only at the 3rd level of the extraordinary realm. The lead thug sneered, his massive frame lunging toward her. She panicked, her lack of combat experience showing as she froze up, not knowing what to do. I was just about to jump down and shout the classic line, "Let go of that girl," when I heard it. The sharp, clear ring of a sword leaving its scabbard. A wave of sharp spiritual energy followed it. That sound was hauntingly familiar. My mind immediately flashed to Lin San. It sounded exactly like his blade, but that didn't make sense. Wasn't he supposed to be heading back to Tianjin City with Lin Xing'a? Why was he still here in the eastern region of Great Xia? A dark shadow blurred through the air. Sword light flashed, and hot blood sprayed across the path. One of the thugs dropped dead before he even knew what hit him. When the shadow landed, I realized I was right. It really was Lin San. My eyes lit up. I almost wanted to shout that I loved him. I had worried that life would get boring after leaving the Qin family, since protagonists aren't exactly common. But thanks to my villain Yahello, the main character had delivered himself right to my doorstep. In broad daylight, You dare bully a young girl? Lin Sen shouted. He held his 3-foot longsword, striking a perfectly heroic pose. He looked every bit the righteous warrior standing on the moral high ground. You killed our brother, the other thugs roared, their rage boiling over. They charged at him like hungry tigers. You're seeking death, Lin Sen muttered. His gaze turned sharp as he threw his sword. The blade turned into a streak of light, piercing through one thug's chest with terrifying force. The smell of blood filled the air, driving the remaining men into a frenzy. Lin Sen didn't flinch. He lunged forward, reclaimed his sword, and cut down several more in a spray of red. I frowned from my spot in the tree. He was at the 4th level of the extraordinary realm now. He had broken through, and his swordsmanship was faster and more lethal than before. He clearly hadn't been wasting his time. But I still didn't understand why he was hanging around Qin family territory. Kid, we underestimated you, the last 3 thugs growled. They realized they were facing a genius who could fight above his level. They didn't hesitate. They pulled out glowing red pills, berserk pills, and swallowed them instantly. Lin Sen's expression shifted. Those pills would double their combat power at the cost of 10 years of their lifespans. Usually, his protagonist luck would carry him through, but against 3 berserkers, he'd end up heavily injured even if he won. He had to kill them before the medicine kicked in. Suddenly, a sword intent that felt like it could split the world itself descended. A sharp wind whipped past Lin Sen's face. Before he could even blink, my silhouette flickered past him like a lone swan crossing the sky. My sky-crossing sword flashed with a light as dark as deep water. In the blink of an eye, I landed and sheathed my blade with a soft click. You? The thugs gasped. Their eyes went wide, and their massive bodies crashed to the ground simultaneously. The system chimed, rewarding me 300 villain points for the kills. A single drop of sweat rolled down Lin Sen's forehead. Even though he had seen my heaven-slaying drawsword technique before, it still terrified him. If I had aimed that strike at him, he wouldn't have had time to react. Honestly, I had considered just killing him right then and there to get a massive payout. The risk of killing Lin Sen right now was just too high. Plot armor is a real thing, and I didn't want to trigger some hidden elder protecting him. It was much safer to stick by his side like a hidden snake, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Brother Lin, what a coincidence, I said, turning around with a smooth, harmless smile. Brother Qin, I didn't expect to run into you again so soon, Lin Sen replied. He clearly hadn't heard the news about me robbing the family treasury yet, so he greeted me with a polite cupped fist salute. Thank you both for saving me, a voice chirped. The girl in purple, Ziyuan, hurried over and bowed deeply to us. I noticed her eyes lingering on Lin Sen with a look that screamed love at first sight. As for me, she ignored me completely. To her, I was just a kid who didn't understand the world. I felt speechless. The protagonist's aura was truly unfair. Even though I did the heavy lifting, he got the girl's attention. Miss Ziyuan, you're too kind. It's a cultivator's duty to help those in need, Lin Sen said, puffing out his chest and acting like a righteous hero. I rolled my eyes so hard they almost got stuck. Ziyuan, however, was eating it up. She had literal stars in her eyes. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. One of the thugs wasn't dead yet. With his last breath, he fired a signal flare into the sky. A massive character for tiger exploded in the clouds, visible for hundreds of miles. It was the mark of the mighty Tiger Gang. Since I was the heir to the Qin family, I knew every small-time group in our territory. The mighty Tiger Gang was a bottom-tier organization with tens of thousands of men. Their leader was in the Lingwu realm, just above the transcendent realm. The Qin family usually ignored them because they paid their protection taxes on time. Our leader is at the 3rd level of the Lingwu realm. The dying thug coughed, blood spraying from his lips. No matter who you are, you're all dead. Ziyuan's face went pale with worry. The 3rd level of the Lingwu realm? We have to leave now. Don't worry, Miss Ziyuan, Lin Sen said, slapping his chest confidently. We'll be fine. I knew what he was thinking. If I wasn't here, he would have grabbed her and run. But since he was standing next to the eldest young master of the Qin family, he figured he could act tough and wait for the gang to come beg for mercy. Wow, you're so brave, I said, giving him a sarcastic thumbs up. Good luck with that. I'm leaving. I wasn't about to let this chosen one show off on my account. I grabbed Ziyuan's small hand and started running immediately. Lin Sin stood there, frozen in awkward silence. If he didn't follow, he'd look like a liar. If he stayed to fight, he'd probably get his head kicked in. In the end, he decided his life was more important than his pride. He thickened his skin and chased after us. Seeing this, the admiration in Ziyuan's eyes instantly vanished. She thought she had found a hero, but it turned out he was just a loudmouth who ran at the first sign of trouble. A notification chimed in my head. I had successfully interrupted the protagonist's cool moment and ruined his standing with the heroine. The system rewarded me with 500 villain points. I felt a surge of energy. This was way too easy. Lin Sin tried to salvage his image as we ran. Brother Qin, I don't understand. With your status, why are we running? It's simple, I said, looking solemn and righteous. I'm not the kind of rich kid who relies on his family to bully others. A real man stands on his own 2 feet. Everything I have today, I earned myself. I want to carve out my own destiny with these 2 hands. Lin Sin actually looked impressed. He'd never met a second-generation heir like me. Even Ziyuan's eyes flickered with a strange light. She hadn't expected a toddler to have such lofty ambitions. Meanwhile, back at the Qin estate, the elders were having a crisis. Since I left, they discovered that 30 million spirit stones were missing from the treasury. These weren't ordinary stones. They were top-grade refined stones. Even for a powerhouse like the Qin family, it took 5 years to save that much. The manager said only Qin Feng entered the vault that day, the first ancestor reported. Then it must be him, the high ancestor replied, his face calm. He had already guessed it. But how did he move 30 million stones? That's a mountain of wealth. It would take hundreds of storage bags. If he didn't have a few tricks, he wouldn't have dared to run away, the high ancestor said with a small smile. Forget it. It's for the kids' use anyway. Don't mention this to anyone else. The first ancestor nodded, but his expression turned grim. There's one more thing. Since the incident, Qin Tian has been depressed and weak. Yun Xia hasn't stopped crying. It's hard on them as parents. The high ancestor sighed. With Qin Tian's current state, he can't lead the clan. We need to find a replacement. Let them live in peace for a while. I hope they recover soon. The news spread fast. The Qin family announced a new acting head, and everyone assumed it was because of my death. The family had lost 2 geniuses in one night, and Qin Tian was being blamed. The once crowded courtyard where the family head lived was now cold and deserted. Uncle, I came to see you, a small voice whispered. Qin Hao, my younger brother, stood under a crooked tree. His face was pale, but he had survived. The childishness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. He wanted to prove me wrong. He believed that true strength came from an invincible will, not from doubting one's own power. Look, isn't that the trash second master? A group of kids shouted, laughing at him. Before, they wouldn't have dared to breathe in his direction. Now that he had fallen, they wanted to kick him while he was down. Anger flared in Qin Hao's chest, but he remembered what I told him. Even if a dragon is in shallow water, it's still a dragon. One day, it will soar back into the heavens. Brother, why? Qin Hao muttered, his eyes welling with tears as he remembered that night. Back on the road, I turned to Lin San. I was curious why he hadn't gone back to Tianqin City with Lin Xiner. I decided to travel and train for a bit before going back, Lin San answered quickly. Too quickly. Training? I narrowed my eyes. I didn't believe a word of it. After years of reading web novels, I knew that when a protagonist says they are training, they really mean they are hunting for ancient ruins, legendary treasures, or beautiful women. They never come home empty-handed. Me too, I said, matching his fake smile. I'm just out here for the experience. Ziyuan looked a bit guilty when I questioned her. She claimed she was also out for experience, but I didn't believe a word of it. After a decade of reading web novels, I knew the pattern. A girl rescued by a protagonist is usually a runaway young lady with 0 survival skills. The hero stays loyal to her despite her uselessness, eventually earning the right to live off her family's wealth. It was the classic soft rice strategy. The sun was setting, so Lin San suggested we find a cave for the night. Ziyuan clapped her hands, thrilled. After seeing how dangerous the world was, she finally realized she was weak, but she still had the heart of a wandering hero. She was determined to stick to us like glue. Night fell, and we lit a campfire. Lin Sen acted the part of the cold, chosen one. He caught a wild bird and started roasting it for himself, completely ignoring that Ziyuan had no idea how to feed herself. She stood there awkwardly, fiddling with her fingers. I decided to play the nice guy. I handed her my roasted bird. "Here, eat mine," I said. She thanked me profusely, throwing her ladylike image out the window as she tore into the meat. She was starving. I watched her eat, thinking of it as an investment. Maybe I could live off her family later too. While they were occupied, I opened my system. I had a lottery draw saved from my Little Frog Brothers trip to the Supreme Valley. The virtual wheel appeared and spun rapidly before slowing to a stop. Ding! Congratulations! Host has drawn the God-level theft skill, Space Snatch. A strange sensation washed over me. I felt the space around me become fluid, as if I could reach out and grab anything I wanted, no matter how well it was hidden or protected. Lin Sen noticed a shift in my aura. He was stunned. He always prided himself on being a peerless genius, thinking his time as a servant was just a temporary phase of life experience. But every time he looked at me, his pride took a hit. Ding! Congratulations! Host has crushed the Chosen One's confidence. Gained 10,000 villain points. I barely heard the notification. I was too focused on testing my new skill. Lin San and Ziyuan were meditating with their eyes closed. Just for fun, I reached out toward Ziyuan and activated the skill. Suddenly, a piece of red cloth appeared in my hand. It was a silk undergarment embroidered with a little duck. I could still feel the lingering warmth on the fabric. I froze. My mind went blank. This wasn't what I intended to grab. I wasn't that kind of person. Ziyuan's body trembled slightly. She felt a sudden draft. Fearing for my reputation as a refined gentleman, I quickly shoved the duck's silk into my storage space and pretended to be deep in meditation. Ziyuan opened her eyes, her face turning pale as she clutched her chest. She realized something intimate was missing. There were only 2 men in the cave. She looked at me, but I was an 8-year-old kid lost in a moment of enlightenment. There was no way I knew about such things. That left Lin San. You shameless rogue," she hissed, her face turning bright red with fury. She didn't care about her earlier gratitude. She stood up and delivered a stinging slap right across Lin San's face. He woke up completely bewildered, holding his cheek. "Sister Ziyuan, what did Brother Lin take from you?" I asked, waking up with the most innocent look I could muster. Ziyuan couldn't bring herself to say it. She stamped her foot in frustration and ran out of the cave into the darkness. Ding! Congratulations! Host has successfully framed the Chosen One. He has earned the girl's hatred. Gained 500 villain points. I breathed a sigh of relief. The system was definitely trying to corrupt me. I was a man of integrity, yet it kept giving me these questionable skills. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the woods. Ziyuan was in trouble. Lin Sen didn't have time to wonder why he'd been slapped. He grabbed his sword and sprinted out. I rolled my eyes. Of course, the hatred phase was immediately followed by a hero saves the beauty moment to fix their relationship. The plot armor of these protagonists was ridiculous. I didn't want to miss the show. I kicked off the ground, moving like an arrow. I wanted to be the fastest man in the valley, and my speed wasn't just for show. Even though Lin Sen had a head start, I caught up to him effortlessly. Lin Sen watched in horror as I glided over his head. Normal movement techniques just made you faster, but mine allowed me to drift through the air for hundreds of meters with a single tap of my toe. It was practically flight. A powerful roar shook the night air, vibrating the very ground beneath us. I landed on a tree branch and looked down. 100 meters away, Ziyuan was backed against a rock. A massive beast was snarling at her. It was a saber-toothed tiger, nearly 7 meters long with half-meter fangs that glinted like polished metal. Its fur was as stiff as steel needles. Judging by its aura, it was at the 9th stage of the transcendent realm. "Brother Qin, we need to work together," Lin Sen shouted as he arrived, his face grim. Monsters were always stronger than humans of the same level, especially the predatory ones. To Lin San, a group consisting of a 4th stage, a 2nd stage, and a useless 3rd stage girl fighting a 9th stage beast was a suicide mission. I looked at the tiger and then back at him. Team up? For this? I had no intention of playing the supporting role to some chosen one. I knew exactly how these stories went. Lin Sin would swoop in, save the girl, and look like a hero while I stood in the background. Not on my watch. Besides, my Dawei Heavenly Dragon technique was the ultimate counter to the demon race. I didn't need a strategy. I just needed to hit it. I leaped from the tree and landed firmly in front of Zi Yuan. "Young Master Qin," she gasped. Her voice trembled with excitement. Seeing my back standing between her and the monster, her panicked expression suddenly softened into a strange calm. The saber-toothed tiger didn't appreciate the intrusion. It let out a deafening roar that sent a bone-chilling aura rippling through the forest like a tidal wave. I sensed the immediate danger. I grabbed Zi Yuan's slender waist, kicked off the ground, and soared like a red crane toward a massive tree behind us. A split second later, a massive boom echoed through the woods. The tiger had lunged, crashing into the spot where we had just been standing. Its massive weight hit like a falling star, pulverizing tree trunks as thick as a man's waist into flying sawdust. "What terrifying speed," Zi Yuan whispered, swallowing hard. If I hadn't snatched her away, she would have been the tiger's midnight snack. Missing its target only made the beast more furious. It snarled and prepared for another pounce. Lin San, watching from the sidelines, shouted frantically, "Brother Qin, stop being stubborn. We can only win if we work together." "You are really annoying," I muttered. I watched the mountain-sized beast charging toward me. My eyes turned cold. If my gaze had been sharp as a blade before, it was now as lethal as a viper. Just as the tiger's razor-sharp claws were about to shred me, I drew the Chongkong's sword. It left the scabbard like a bolt of lightning. Heaven-slaying drawl. A crisp, metallic ring echoed through the trees. The sword light briefly turned the night into day. For a heartbeat, the charging tiger seemed frozen in time. I landed and gasped for air. My lungs burned, and my arm began to shake uncontrollably. A massive gash burst open on the tiger's chest, deep enough to see bone. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Because the gap in our cultivation levels was too wide, that single strike didn't kill it. Instead, it completely ignited the beast's primitive rage. The tiger let out a roar that vibrated the very air. It charged again, its mountain-like body smashing through trees as it barreled toward me with overwhelming pressure. "Young Master Qin, look out!" Zi Yuan screamed, her heart in her throat. "Brother Qin, don't panic. I'm here," Lin Sin shouted. He flew forward with his sword raised. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to steal my kill. "Damn it, you want to snatch the final blow?" I cursed internally. It was time to stop holding back. I quickly formed a series of hand seals, channeling every ounce of energy I had left. Dawei Heavenly Dragon, Earth Treasury Suppression. A dragon's roar shook the forest. A brilliant golden light illuminated the entire night sky. I sank my energy into my core and thrust my palm forward. A dull thud echoed through the woods. The charging saber-toothed tiger was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. It crashed into the ground, kicking up a storm of dead leaves. After a few violent twitches, it went limp. It was dead. A notification pinged in my head. Ding. Congratulations to the host for stopping the Chosen One from showing off. You prevented him from gaining the goddess's favor. Reward, 500 villain points. What kind of move was that? Lin Sin stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He thought my heaven-slaying draw was scary enough, but this dragon technique was on another level. I had just one-shot a 9th-stage transcendent beast. Even if it was already wounded, the fact that a 2nd-stage cultivator could pull that off was a massive blow to his ego as the greatest swordsman. "Young Master Qin is incredible," Zi Yuan whispered. Her eyes sparkled with a new kind of intensity. Her favorability toward me was skyrocketing. Ding. Congratulations to the host for further preventing the Chosen One from gaining favor. Reward, 500 villain points. I exhaled slowly. Those 1,000 points weren't easy to earn. I felt like collapsing. The Dawei Heavenly Dragon technique was devastating against monsters, but the energy drain was brutal. My legs felt like jelly, and my head was spinning. Suddenly, the sound of clapping drifted through the trees. We all snapped into a defensive stance. A man with a prominent scar walked out of the shadows, followed by a group of thugs. Their clothes gave them away immediately. They were from the fearless tiger gang. Impressive skills, young hero, the scarred man said, his eyes scanning the three of us. If I'm not mistaken, you're the ones who killed my disciples. If you don't give me an explanation today, I'm afraid you won't be leaving. An explanation? Before Lin San could even open his mouth, I stepped forward with an arrogant smirk. You're asking my big brother Lin San for an explanation? Is there something wrong with your head? Let me tell you something. This is just how we do things. Lin San nearly coughed up a mouthful of blood. He looked at me like I was insane, clearly wanting to tell them we weren't friends. Big brother, I'm going to go rest for a bit, I said, patting Lin San on the shoulder. I'll leave these losers to you. I grabbed Ziyuan's hand and started walking away. Before I disappeared into the brush, I made sure to flip them all off. How bold! The scarred man's face turned dark. He looked like he was about to explode. In truth, after seeing me fight the tiger, he knew I was a once-in-a-generation genius. He had planned to just go through the motions, give us a way out, and save face in front of his men. But I hadn't just refused to give him face. I had basically slapped him twice in front of his entire crew. He couldn't let that slide. It's a mistake. A misunderstanding. Lin San shouted, trying to fix the situation. Actually, you all know my friend here. He's your master, the eldest son of the Qin family, Qin Feng. Qin Feng. He's Qin Feng. The gang members gasped. As a small-time power in the 18 counties of the eastern Great Xia, they weren't important enough to have seen my face, but they had certainly heard the legends. The boy with the earthly supreme talent. The future hope of the Qin family. The kid who broke into the transcendent realm at age 8, created his own sword style, and defeated the successor of the sword god. But the most famous story was the most recent one, how I had supposedly dug out my own brother's supreme bone and fled the family. The Qin family had already issued a massive bounty. Anyone who brought in my head could claim 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones. If they caught me alive, they'd get a heavenly treasure gourd on top of it. The news had set the entire desolate valley on fire. Anyone who thought they were strong enough was currently hunting for me. The gang members looked at me like I was a giant pile of gold. Lin San saw the look in their eyes and realized something was very wrong. His heart sank. He had tried to use my name to scare them, but it looked like he had just started a gold rush. When these guys heard my name, they didn't drop to their knees and beg for mercy. Instead, their eyes lit up like a bunch of creeps who had just spotted a world-class beauty. I'll handle this guy, the scarred man said, his eyes locked on Lin San. The rest of you go after Qin Feng. He wasn't taking any chances. He had heard the rumors about me killing high-level spirit beasts, so he figured anyone I called Big Brother had to be a total monster. He was going all out, treating a house cat like a tiger. His men took off immediately, sprinting after us. The scarred man roared, and a terrifying aura exploded from his body. The air around him shimmered, and a faint image of a mountain tiger appeared behind his back. Holy crap, Lin San cursed. Level 3 of the Lingwu realm? He's the leader of the Weihu gang. He knew he was in deep trouble. Before he could even react, the scarred leader lunged forward. It was a classic tiger descending the mountain strike, but he had mastered it to a terrifying degree. The pressure was suffocating. Rocks tumbled and cracks spider-webbed across the ground as he moved. Clang! The sound of metal hitting metal rang through the forest. The shockwave vibrated through the air. Lin San managed to draw his sword just in time to block, but the impact was brutal. His right arm went numb instantly, and his sword flew out of his hand. The scarred leader was actually surprised. A level 4 transcendent kid had actually blocked a strike from a level 3 Lingwu master. He didn't waste time being impressed, though. He turned up the heat, determined to end this quickly. Too strong, Lin San muttered. I really have to use that move. He was probably cursing my name right about then. I didn't care. Back in the woods, I was dragging Ziyuan along at top speed. A notification popped up in my head. I had just earned 2,000 villain points for setting up the Child of Destiny. I kept running, silently praying that Lin San would be useful for once and buy us some time. We just left him there? Ziyuan asked, her face pale with worry. What about Master Lin? Don't worry, I said, not missing a beat. He'll be fine. I had zero guilt about selling out a teammate. I could handle a few more Children of Destiny, if it meant keeping my skin intact. Suddenly, a high-pitched hum vibrated through the trees. A blinding flash of sword light erupted behind us, followed by a wave of sharp, icy chi that swept through the entire forest. It hit everyone, the gang members, the trees, and even us. Ziyuan didn't stand a chance. She coughed up a mouthful of blood and collapsed into my arms, completely unconscious. I hit the ground too, feeling like I'd reached my limit. I just lay there in the grass, not wanting to move a single muscle. The night passed in a blur. By dawn, the forest was quiet again. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, hitting Ziyuan's face. She groaned, rubbing her eyes as she woke up. Then, she froze. She was lying in my arms in a very suggestive position. Her hands were definitely somewhere they shouldn't have been. And if she remembered correctly, which she did, she wasn't wearing her protective silk undergarment. A piercing scream shattered the morning silence, scaring every bird for miles. "What are you yelling for?" I grumbled, waking up from a great dream. I wasn't about to admit to taking advantage of the situation. I was just a kid, right? What could I possibly know about being a pervert? Another notification pinged. 200 villain points for harassing a girl. My ears perked up. I sensed movement. I quickly covered Ziyuan's mouth and pulled her into the tall grass. I was still thinking about that sword light from last night. It had been terrifying, filled with a sword intent that didn't seem to belong to this world. It had to be Lin San's trump card. He was the successor of the sword god, after all. Heavy footsteps approached. 5 members of the Weihu gang stumbled into the clearing. They looked rough, covered in cuts and bruises from the sword storm. It was probably that girl screaming, the leader of the group said. "They can't be far. Go back and call." He didn't finish his sentence. I burst from the grass like a shadow. My energy was fully recovered, and I was ready to play. Shing! The sound of my sword leaving its scabbard was cold and crisp. A dark arc of light flashed through the air. In a heartbeat, 5 sprays of blood painted the leaves red. The men collapsed like puppets with their strings cut. Their eyes went dull, and their breath stopped instantly. 500 more villain points. Ziyuan stared at me, her eyes wide with terror. "Are you really just a child?" I didn't answer. I just grabbed her hand and pulled her away. The Weihu gang would be swarming this area any minute. Not far away, on a small ridge, the gang leader stood with a grim expression. His right sleeve fluttered empty in the wind. He had lost his arm to Lin San's final strike. If he hadn't been fast enough to cut it off himself, that sword chi would have killed him. "These geniuses are terrifying," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. He knew the stakes now. My head was worth a fortune, and Lin San clearly carried a legendary inheritance. Even the girl, Ziyuan, was a prize. In this valley, if you had power and money, you needed a beauty by your side. He stared into the treeline, his eyes burning with greed. It was a gamble. If he won, he'd be a king. If he lost, he was dead anyway. He decided to go all in. A lackey rushed up to the leader of the Weihu gang, panting heavily. "Boss, we found that kid Lin San." Some of the brothers saw him open an ancient ruin and head inside. The scarred leader looked stunned. He had been the king of these mountains for decades and had never heard of any ruins in this area. Why did this Lin San find one the second he arrived? Was he just not worthy of owning it? Greed won out. The leader immediately summoned all tens of thousands of disciples of the Weihu gang. He took a large group with him to investigate the ruins, leaving the rest to continue scouring the forest for me and Ziyuan. As I moved through the woods with Ziyuan, I couldn't help but feel a bit insulted. The people we ran into were all small fry. The strongest among them were only at the 7th or 8th level of the transcendent realm, and they didn't even have any special talent attributes. I didn't even need to use my slashing heaven sword art. I just used my falling leaves technique to clear them out with ease. "It must be because of Lin San's strike last night," Ziyuan said. "They've sent their main force to deal with him instead." Lin San. I raised an eyebrow. Something didn't add up. Logically, the scarred leader should be hunting me with everything he had to claim the Qin family's bounty. Shifting his main focus to Lin San only made sense if Lin San was suddenly more valuable than me. A wicked smile played on my lips. I whispered to myself, if I had to guess, Lin San's protagonist Yahello has finally activated. That guy didn't go back to Tianxin City with Lin Xier for a reason. He stayed behind for these treasures. What are you mumbling about? Ziyuan asked, curious. Nothing. Let's go. To prove my theory, I grabbed Ziyuan's hand and started heading back the way we came. I had to find Lin Sen fast. I needed to intercept him before his halo fully powered up. Wait, are you crazy? Ziyuan hissed, trying to pull back. You know they're searching for us, and you want to go back? I didn't give her a choice. I grabbed her by the waist and activated my phantom escape, flickering through the trees like a ghost. She couldn't resist my strength and could only let this little brat have his way. Soon, we reached the spot where I had encountered the scarred leader the night before. Trees within a 1,000-meter radius had been sliced clean in half. A sword gash dozens of meters deep scarred the earth. It was a terrifying sight. This was really Lin San's doing? Ziyuan swallowed hard. She couldn't imagine that kind of power. The Chosen One is even more terrifying than I thought. I thought to myself. I was glad I hadn't picked a direct fight with him yet. Even with my Pupil of the Void, I might not have been his match unless I used my red-haired old monster trial card. I needed to get stronger. Now, I reached into my storage space and pulled out the supreme bone I had taken from my brother. Mysterious runes pulsed on its surface, and I could feel a faint, primordial power radiating from it. If I transplanted this into my own body, that power would be mine. What is that? Ziyuan stared at the bone, her eyes wide. I didn't answer. My gaze turned as sharp as a blade. I drew my long sky sword and, without hesitating, plunged it into my own chest. I carved out my original bone and began the process of grafting the supreme bone in its place. Blood soaked my clothes, but I gritted my teeth and didn't make a sound. Ziyuan was horrified. She couldn't believe an 8-year-old kid could be this ruthless to himself. I felt my face twisting from the agony, but I pushed through. I knew that if I wanted to survive and thrive in this world, I had to be cruel to others, and even crueler to myself. If I couldn't handle this level of pain, how could I ever reach the top? You're insane. Who stabs themselves with a sword? Ziyuan finally snapped out of her shock and rushed forward to bandage my wound. But before she could touch me, the wound began to heal at a visible speed. In less than 10 minutes, the skin had closed completely. Not even a scar remained. Since I had mastered the 3rd level of the 33 Heavens creation technique, my regenerative abilities were becoming freakish. I couldn't regrow a limb yet, but I was getting close. What kind of monster are you? Ziyuan whispered, her heart racing. An 8-year-old who could fight way above his level was one thing. But I had the slashing heaven sword art, the great mighty heavenly dragon, and now this insane healing factor. Any one of those abilities would make an old master in the desolate valley jealous. And yet, I had them all. Looking at the destruction Lin Sen left behind, it was clear the era of geniuses had arrived. You're the monster. Your whole family are monsters. I grumbled, rolling my eyes. I started tracking the trail Lin Sen had left behind. Wait for me. Ziyuan scrambled to follow. She didn't dare be left alone. She knew her best bet was to stick close to me. It didn't take long to find it. We avoided the Weihu gang patrols and reached a stone cliff deep in the forest. A swirling black vortex, like a hole in reality, sat in the center of the rock face. A ruin. My eyes lit up. I remembered the clan elders talking about these. They were small worlds created by powerful masters to store their legacies and treasures. Even if there was no inheritance, there would be rare herbs and materials. A notification popped up in my mind. Asterisk ding. Villain mission triggered. Steal the Chosen One's fortuitous opportunity. Reward. 1 golden treasure chest. Asterisk. No wonder the gang ignored me to chase Lin Sen. The Chosen One really did have heaven on his side, practically being hand-fed treasures. Meanwhile, as the villain, I had to work for every scrap. What are we waiting for? Let's go in. Ziyuan was practically vibrating with excitement. She was a wandering martial artist. After all, she couldn't pass up a ruin. Not yet. I looked at the sky and found a hidden spot to sit cross-legged. As someone who had read 1,000 web novels, I knew one thing for sure. Entering a dungeon with the protagonist was harder than surviving a lightning tribulation. Teammates usually ended up as sacrifices, and enemies were just stepping stones. Once that protagonist halo turned on, it didn't care who it hurt. I was going to let the bullet fly for a while. You can't eat hot tofu if you're too impatient. What does that even mean? Ziyuan asked, but I didn't answer. I closed my eyes and entered a meditative state, feeling the surrounding spiritual energy begin to flow into my new bone. I closed my eyes and focused inward. The supreme bone I had recently transplanted into my body showed no signs of rejection. Instead, mysterious runes began to flow through my veins, birthing a new divine ability called the Heaven's Light. Was this the true power hidden within the supreme bone? I still had a month-long comprehension aura active from my last system exchange. I didn't waste a second and began to meditate on the Heaven's Light. Suddenly, the void around me trembled. A vast, ocean-like power of heaven and earth swept toward me. In the face of this energy, everything felt small and insignificant. My breathing grew heavy. It felt like I was climbing a mountain where every step forward doubled the gravity, pushing me down. My body shook, but my mind became clearer. I realized something important. While the Heaven's Light was powerful, it was best used as a support skill. I shifted my focus to my invincible pupil. Because my cultivation was still low, most of the pupil's abilities were locked. Aside from seeing through illusions, I could only decompose movements and slow down time. While I was deep in meditation, Ziyuan sat nearby with her chin in her hands, looking bored. She wanted to enter the ruins, but she didn't dare go alone. Her stomach let out a loud growl. She was already thinking about the roasted chicken I had promised her. Inside the ruins, Lin San moved cautiously. He held a sword in one hand and a map in the other. He had originally planned to return to Tianqin City, but he'd stumbled upon a broken map fragment that perfectly completed the one he already had. The location just happened to be on Qin family territory. He knew the Qin family's influence was massive, so he hadn't dared to open the ruins earlier for fear they would take everything for themselves. Luckily, I had run off with Ziyuan the night before, giving him the perfect window to explore. Suddenly, screams echoed from the distance. Lin San glanced back coldly. He knew the Tiger Gang had followed him in. Unlike the Qin family, the Tiger Gang didn't scare him. The traps in this ruin would deal with them easily. He picked up his pace, following the map toward the treasure chamber. Outside, a muffled boom echoed from inside my body. A wave of spiritual energy rippled outward. The meditation was over. Ziyuan perked up instantly, her eyes wide with hope for her chicken. I exhaled a long breath of turbid air. Third level of the transcendent realm, I whispered. I could feel the difference. Before, my spiritual energy could only reach 5 meters from my body. Now, it could hit 10 meters with twice the power. I felt like a middle-aged man who had suddenly regained the vitality of an 18-year-old. Then, the sound of rapid footsteps broke the silence. Thousands of Tiger Gang disciples swarmed out from the surrounding woods, surrounding us from all sides. We've been spotted. Ziyuan panicked. She grabbed my arm, ready to bolt. Even with my talent, fighting 1,000 people at once seemed impossible. Wait, she said, trying to force a smile at the approaching mob. We have no grudge against you. It was Lin San who killed your people, not us. The leader of the group stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with greed. That doesn't matter anymore. Our target is Qin Feng. Ziyuan ducked behind me, confused. Why are they targeting you? They're ignoring the guy who actually killed their friends just to get to you. I shrugged. Maybe it's because I'm too handsome? Ziyuan rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Young Master Qin, the leader shouted, you are surrounded. Surrender now so we don't have to get blood on our blades. I looked at the 1,000-man army and felt a strange surge of excitement. Are you sure you're the ones doing the surrounding? The Tiger Gang disciples burst into mocking laughter. They thought I had lost my mind. Did this kid really think one person could surround 1,000? Kill him, the leader barked. The black mass of disciples charged. Ziyuan closed her eyes in despair, her stomach growling one last time. She was actually sad she'd have to die on an empty stomach. Suddenly, a sharp, ear-piercing hum filled the air. I formed a hand seal, and my sky-shattering sword split into 9 miniature blades. They hovered around me, glowing with lethal intent. 9 swords out. I pointed at the charging crowd. The small blades turned into streaks of light, whistling through the air like falling stars. There were no fancy movements, just pure, clinical efficiency. The swords darted through the ranks, harvesting lives in seconds. "What is this?" someone screamed. Fear spread like wildfire. The swords were so small and fast that nobody could track them. Within moments, 100 men were dead on the ground. Not a single person could get within 5 meters of me. Asterisk ding. Host killed 1 enemy. Reward, 100 villain points. Asterisk asterisk ding. Host killed 1 enemy. Reward, 100 villain points. Asterisk. The system notifications chimed in my head like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. Run. He's a monster. The survivors broke. They didn't care about the bounty or the Chin family anymore. They realized that my age meant nothing. My speed was absolute. One by one, they turned and fled into the woods, desperate to get away from the great demon they had accidentally cornered. Ziyuan opened her eyes and stared at the carnage, her jaw dropping. "Oh my God!" Ziyuan gasped, her hands covering her mouth in shock. She stared at the scene, completely frozen. To her, I was a legendary genius, a monster who could cut through 1,000 enemies like they were nothing. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the battle. With a sharp flick of my wrist, I recalled the 9 small blades. They flew back to me, shrinking and vanishing into my sleeve. It looked easy, like harvesting leeks in a garden, but controlling 9 separate flying swords at once took a massive toll on my energy. Even with my sky treasure gourd rapidly replenishing my mana, I knew I couldn't keep that pace up forever. A series of chimes echoed in my mind. Asterisk ding. Congratulations, host. You have killed 232 enemies. Ding. Reward, 23,200 villain points. I took another deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The rewards were incredible, but I felt a dark, addictive pull in my chest. Killing could become a habit. It was a slippery slope that led straight to the demonic path. Most cultivators spent their lives practicing restraint to avoid falling into that darkness. Of course, some people chose to become demons willingly just for the power. But me? I had a powerful background and the best cheat system in existence. I didn't need to start wearing dark eye makeup and turning myself into some half-human, half-ghost freak just to get ahead. Suddenly, a dozen figures appeared in the sky. They stood atop flying swords, drifting through the clouds with an air of absolute superiority. Rodeo Realm Cultivators. Ziyuan cried out. My eyes narrowed. The Rodeo Realm was the stage above the Lingwu Realm. The name literally meant entering the Tao. It signified that a cultivator had finally grasped the true meaning of the world and stepped through the gates of immortality. They weren't just warriors anymore. They were true seekers of the way. Found you, Chin Feng, one of them shouted. The dozen cultivators locked their eyes on me. Their gazes were intense, hungry, the same look a predator gives its prey. Why are they looking for you two? Ziyuan whispered, trembling as she ducked behind my back. She could feel the killing intent radiating from them. I didn't even have to think about it. It has to be Lin San. He's definitely using my name to run scams out there. As a seasoned reader of web novels, I knew the protagonist's playbook by heart. If they couldn't beat a villain, they'd smear their name. They'd commit crimes using the villain's identity to draw heat away from themselves. I wasn't about to admit I was a wanted man, so blaming the hero was the perfect cover. I can't believe Mr. Lin is that kind of person, Ziyuan muttered. She was still too innocent for this world. She actually believed my lies. Let's go. The Rodeo cultivators began their dive. I grabbed Ziyuan's hand and bolted toward the nearby ruins. My plan was simple. Lead these guys straight to Lin San. If he wanted to be the hero, he could deal with a dozen high-level cultivators looking for blood. A ruin. The cultivators' eyes lit up with greed. No one could resist the lure of ancient treasures. They steered their flying swords and dived headfirst into the entrance after us. The world spun. When my vision cleared, Ziyuan and I were standing inside a massive hidden space. It looked just like the world outside. Mountains, rivers, forests, and even a sun and moon. This was a pocket dimension created by a supreme master. I was stunned. I couldn't imagine the level of power needed to manufacture an entire mini-world. We have to move, Ziyuan said, surprisingly calm. They'll be here any second. She pulled me into the dense forest. Behind us, More cultivators were pouring into the ruins. The word was out. The disciples I let escape earlier must have spread the news of my location and the hidden treasure. The place was about to become a hornet's nest. I've got a bad feeling about this, I muttered, looking at the crowds entering the portal. This place is a death trap. You can tell fortunes? Ziyuan asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. No, I said, giving her a flat look. But I know how these things go. This is a high-difficulty dungeon. With Lin San's protagonist luck involved, the survival rate for everyone else is basically zero. Ziyuan rolled her eyes at me. Even at her young age, she had a certain charm when she was annoyed. You're just making things up. You don't understand, I replied. I knew the rules of the world. Whenever a protagonist enters a crowded dungeon, something catastrophic happens. In the end, only a few people survive to tell the tale of how amazing the protagonist was. Suddenly, the sound of clashing steel echoed through the trees. People were already fighting over loot. This place had been sealed for so long that it was crawling with rare herbs and spiritual plants. Ziyuan and I had found a few things on our way in, but they were common weeds compared to whatever was causing a bloodbath up ahead. Let's check it out, I whispered. Ziyuan nodded eagerly. To stay hidden, I rubbed some dirt and ash on my face and clothes. I needed to look like a dusty wanderer, not a pampered young master of a great family. We crept through the brush until we reached the edge of a clearing. It was a massacre. Several groups were locked in a frantic melee, with dozens of bodies already littering the blood-soaked grass. In the center of the chaos grew a thick vine heavy with small, bright red fruits that pulsed with a faint light. Blood Bodhi, Ziyuan nearly screamed. She grabbed my arm and squeezed so hard I thought my bone would snap. I couldn't blame her for losing it. If spiritual treasures were ranked, the Blood Bodhi was at the very top, a rare heaven-grade item. Eating one could heal any injury, boost your cultivation, and strengthen your foundation. The best part? You could eat as many as you wanted without the effects diminishing. It was a cultivator's dream. They only grew for those with immense luck, mostly because the vines withered the moment the fruit was picked. That's too much, I hissed, looking at my bruised arm. I'm not the type to hold a grudge. I usually settle them on the spot. Ow, ow, gentle. Ziyuan winced as I pinched her thigh in retaliation. She realized where we were and bit her lip to keep from crying out. She looked at me with teary eyes, silently promising never to squeeze my arm again. I'll let it slide this time, I whispered, pulling my hand back. I had to admit, she was soft, but now wasn't the time for that. The situation in the clearing was grim. The fighters weren't just small fries. There were Lingwu realm masters and even Rodeo realm experts in the mix. Even with my cultivation at the third level of the extraordinary realm, my supreme bone, and my god eyes, I knew I couldn't take them all at once. I had to be smart. I could have used my max-level red-haired monster transformation card to handle these guys, but that would be like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It wasn't worth wasting a trump card on these extras. You're such a mean little brother, Ziyuan muttered, rubbing her leg. She looked like she was about to cry from the pain of my pinch. But a second later, she forgot all about it. Her eyes widened as she watched me. I stared at the Blood Bodhi fruits in the distance. I reached out, my palm open, and gave a sharp tug at the air. A bright red fruit vanished from the vine and appeared instantly in my hand. How did you do that? Ziyuan gasped. She rubbed her eyes, checking if she was hallucinating. When she realized it was real, her eyes sparkled like stars. It's a secret, I said. I wasn't in the mood to explain the mechanics of space manipulation to her. Now that I knew my long-distance retrieval worked, I went into overdrive. I kept snatching the fruits through the air, one after another. On the distant vine, the clusters of Blood Bodhi began to disappear at a rate visible to the naked eye. Ziyuan watched me, but her expression shifted from wonder to realization. Her face suddenly turned bright red. She looked at the fruits vanishing into thin air and then looked at me. This was exactly how her silk undergarments had disappeared that night. The criminal wasn't Lin San. It was me. She had thought I was just an innocent kid who didn't know anything. Now, she realized I knew way too much. You perverted little brother, she whispered, turning her head away. No wonder my aunt says no man is any good. She paused, thinking of the second half of her aunt's advice, something about men having one good thing on them. She still didn't understand what that meant. What are you mumbling about? I asked, glancing back. Nothing, she squeaked, her face flushing deeper. Are you taking that many? Don't you feel bad? Why would I be soft-hearted? I replied. If I didn't take them, someone else would. I didn't plan on leaving a single one behind. Wait. Everyone stopped fighting, someone in the clearing screamed. The various factions stopped their brawling and looked at the vine. It was almost bare. They watched in horror as the last few fruits vanished right in front of their faces. Once the last one was gone, the vine withered and turned to gray ash. Who did this? The leaders roared. They were losing their minds. They had fought for hours, sacrificed dozens of brothers, and ended up with absolutely nothing. Nobody could stomach that kind of loss. Who are you two? A group of cultivators spotted us, trying to slip away. They swarmed us, surrounding us in a massive circle. Just 2 kids in the extraordinary realm. The leader looked disappointed. He didn't believe 2 low-level cultivators could have cleared the vine right under their noses. One man narrowed his eyes, studying my dusty face. Wait, this kid looks familiar. What are you looking at? I barked, putting on my best arrogant act. Do you have any idea who my big brother is? Tell them, it'll scare them to death. I puffed out my chest. My big brother is the legendary Qin Feng. He's the successor of the Sky Sword God, Lin San. We're brothers. He's like a father and mother to me. Lin San. The crowd gasped. Everyone knew that name. He was hailed as the top swordsman of the next century. He had recently fought the Qin family's eldest son to a standstill. He was a rising star with the backing of Tianjin City. He was someone they couldn't afford to provoke. Ziyuan rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. She couldn't believe how easily I lied. I decided to fan the flames. I'll tell you the truth. My big brother opened this ruin 3 days ago. These blood bodies were just the scraps he didn't want. If you mess with me, you'd better think about the consequences. The crowd looked at each other. They ignored my threat, but they focused on the lead. They had already heard from the Weihu gang that a guy named Lin San had opened the entrance. If Lin San didn't even want the blood bodies, that meant he must have found a much greater treasure deeper inside. In an instant, the crowd scattered like startled birds. They didn't care about us anymore. They wanted to find Lin San and his ultimate treasure. You really are a bad little brother, Ziyuan said, watching them run. She wondered what Lin San had done to deserve being my scapegoat. Soon, the rumor that Lin San had obtained a peerless treasure spread through the entire ruins. Every cultivator began hunting for him. Somewhere in the distance, I could almost hear Lin San cursing, wondering which honest person was spreading such blatant lies about his wealth. Achoo, I sneezed. Someone was definitely talking about me. I turned my attention to my haul. I had grabbed 32 fruits. I popped one into my mouth. A massive wave of energy exploded in my chest. My foundation, which had been a bit shaky after my rapid breakthrough to the 3rd level, instantly became solid and powerful. This is amazing, Ziyuan said, her eyes widening after eating one herself. Suddenly, a woman in a white, ancient-style dress appeared. She stared at the fruits in my hand with a complicated expression. Big sister, do you need something? Ziyuan asked curiously. What big sister? I grabbed Ziyuan's arm and pulled her back, my voice cold. You monster. I can tell with one look that you aren't human. Not human. Ziyuan jumped, hiding behind me. This wasn't like the mindless beasts we'd seen before. A monster that could take human form was a high-level demon. Their power was terrifying. Don't misunderstand. I mean no harm, the woman said. She looked shocked that a child could see through her disguise so easily. You think we'll believe that? I didn't relax for a second. I kept my fingers ready to trigger my great wisdom dragon technique. My ancestors told me that the conflict between humans and demons was ancient and bloody. A simple no harm wasn't enough to make me lower my guard. The woman hesitated. I entered the ruins to find treasures for my newborn child. I just gave birth, and I'm very weak. I couldn't compete with those men for the fruits. I don't need much. Just 10. She looked at me with pleading eyes. For a high-level demon to admit she was weak and had just given birth was incredibly dangerous. Humans would usually kill her on the spot to harvest her core and skin. She was gambling her life on my mercy. Looking at her, I saw a flash of my own mother. For 8 years, Yin Xie had given me everything. By choosing this path of cultivation, I knew I'd eventually cause her pain. For the sake of a mother's love, I'll give you 10, I said, my tone softening. Then I smirked. But as a mother, you wouldn't want your child to grow up thinking they can get things for free, right? Let's keep it professional. 10 fruits for 100,000 top-grade spirit stones. Ziyuan nearly coughed up blood. I was unbelievable. I talked about humanitarian spirit, but my heart was all business. I don't have any spirit stones, the woman said, looking embarrassed. She was truly broke. No money? That's fine, I said, my eyes gleaming. We can talk about other resources. I smiled and pulled out a small notebook. I figured a powerful demon who could take human form had to have something valuable. Maybe she knew where some hidden treasures were buried, or the location of ancient ruins, or perhaps she held some dirty secrets about the big players in this world. But she just looked at me, looking more troubled than ever. It turned out she had absolutely nothing. Not a single resource I asked for. I was honestly impressed. I'd seen poor people before, but I'd never seen a high-level demon this broke. I had no idea how she even managed to cultivate her way to this level. Suddenly, a shout echoed from the distance. We found Lin-san, and there's an incredible treasure with him. My eyes lit up. Finally. I grabbed Ziyuan and started running toward the commotion. Before I disappeared, I glanced back at the woman in white one last time. I saw the confusion in her eyes, a mother who felt like a failure because she couldn't provide for her child. I couldn't help myself. I reached into my bag and tossed a small bundle toward her. It wasn't that I was being soft. It was my villain's intuition telling me this was a good investment. She opened the package and gasped. It was filled with blood bodhi fruits. I hadn't given her 10 like she asked. I gave her 15. Those extra 5 would be enough to help her recover her strength quickly. Thank you, she whispered toward my retreating back. She turned and vanished into the ruins, looking a lot more hopeful. Why did you just give them to her? Ziyuan asked, clearly confused. Think of it as planting a seed, I replied. I didn't feel like explaining the details. Even if that demon was broke, she was still powerful. It's better to help someone when they're at their lowest than to try and flatter them when they're already at the top. Who knows? Maybe one day, this favor would save my life. It didn't take long for us to find a crowd. They were all surrounding Lin-san. Behind him stood a stone altar protected by a glowing barrier. On top sat an exquisitely carved jade box. One look told me this was the most valuable prize in the entire ruins, the very thing Lin-san had come for. I tried to use my fetch technique from a distance, but my cultivation level was too low. I couldn't pierce the barrier to grab the box. Lin-san looked furious. With his secret map, he should have cleared this place out easily. He was one step away from the ultimate prize, but some anonymous person had leaked the news and sent the entire ruins hunting for him. Now he was surrounded. He couldn't just take the treasure for himself anymore. Even with his hidden trump cards, he couldn't fight off dozens of high-level cultivators at once. He had to use his head. Lin-san, this treasure isn't meant for you, a group of cultivators shouted. Since no one from the powerful Sky Heart City was around to protect him, they looked down from their flying swords with total contempt. Get lost if you know what's good for you. Fine, have it your way, Lin-san said. He didn't argue. He just quietly backed away to the side. Something felt wrong. Since when was a child of destiny so easy to talk to? Based on my years of reading web novels, when a protagonist gets bullied like this and doesn't react, it usually means someone is about to have a very bad day. I frowned, sensing a trap. I grabbed Ziyuan and moved even further back, hiding behind the crowd. The cultivators in the sky started laughing. They mocked Lin-san, calling him a coward and saying his reputation as a legendary swordsman was a joke. They figured that without his sect backing him, he was nothing. Everyone, one of them shouted. We need to break this barrier together. Once it's down, the jade box belongs to whoever is fast enough to grab it. Agreed, the others shouted. They knew they had to move fast before even stronger experts arrived to take over. Attack. On command, they all unleashed their spiritual energy. Dozens of techniques streaked through the air like falling stars, causing the very space around us to tremble. The attacks slammed into the barrier with a deafening explosion. But the barrier didn't shatter. Instead, it began to glow with a strange, swirling rainbow of colors. It was absorbing their energy. Something's wrong, someone screamed. The energy inside the barrier began to swell and bloat. Everyone realized too late what was happening. They scrambled to set up defensive shields. Boom. A second explosion ripped through the air, 10 times louder than the first. The barrier didn't just break. It reflected all that gathered energy back at the crowd in a massive shockwave. The ruins were devastated. The people in the front rows, the ones just there to watch the show, were either sent flying with broken bones or killed instantly. Ziyuan clutched my hand, her heart racing. If I hadn't pulled her back, she would have been shredded by that blast. I knew that guy was up to no good, I muttered, looking over at Lin-san. He had a tiny, smug smirk on his face. The cultivators in the sky were screaming in rage. The barrier had a damage reflection effect. To break it, you needed to hit it with a single strike strong enough to exceed its limit. These guys simply weren't strong enough. Cracks began to spread across the walls and the ceiling of the ruins. The sky itself looked like a shattered mirror. It was a self-destruct mechanism. The creator of this place clearly only wanted a true genius to inherit the treasure. If some mediocre idiots tried to force their way in, the whole place would bury them. The ruins are collapsing. Run! Panic set in. Everyone started sprinting for the exit, terrified of being buried alive. What are you doing? We have to go, Ziyuan urged, pulling at my arm. But I didn't move. I was watching Lin-san. He looked surprised to see me there. I could tell he was starting to suspect that I was the one who had been sabotaging him this whole time. But he didn't have time to prove it. He had to move. Lin-san moved his fingers in a complex pattern and struck a specific corner of the barrier. With a sound like breaking glass, the barrier finally shattered. A pillar of holy light shot into the sky, filling the ruins with a divine aura. The cultivators who were running away saw the light and immediately turned back, desperate to grab the box. But they were too far away. Lin-san smirked, snatched the jade box, and pulled out a yellow paper talisman covered in ancient runes. A space teleportation talisman. The cultivators cried out in horror. They launched their strongest attacks to stop him, but the distance was too great. The runes began to glow, wrapping around Lin-san as he prepared to vanish. Lin-san didn't forget to give us a smug wave goodbye. He thought he had won. Now, I muttered. My eyes were locked on that jade box. I activated my telekinesis and pulled with everything I had. I didn't try to grab the box itself. That was firmly in Lin-san's grip. Instead, I targeted the treasure inside. With a sharp mental tug, the item flew out of the box and straight into my storage space. A series of system notifications chimed in my head. Asterisk ding. Congratulations, host. You completed the villain mission. Reward, golden treasure chest. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. You sabotaged the chosen one's destiny. Reward, 1 lucky draw. Asterisk. Asterisk ding. You snatched the chosen one's treasure. Reward, 1 million villain points. Asterisk. 1 million points? My heart skipped a beat. If the system was handing out 1 million points just as a reward, the actual value of this treasure had to be insane. Buying something like this from the shop would probably cost 100 million. The ground shook. The powerful attacks from the Dowentree cultivators finally landed, but they hit nothing but air. Lin-san was long gone, vanished by the teleportation talisman. He couldn't have gone far. After him. The cultivators screamed, their faces twisted with rage. They couldn't stand the fact that a kid had played them all for fools. We need to leave now, I said. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed Ziyuan's hand and bolted for the exit. The world was falling apart. The ground beneath us kept collapsing into a void of pitch-black darkness. If we fell in there, the spatial turbulence would shred us to pieces. Help me. The ruins were filled with the sounds of wailing and screaming. People were dying everywhere. In the face of death, humanity showed its ugliest side. I saw cultivators using their own comrades as stepping stones to jump higher. I saw friends dragging each other down so they wouldn't die alone. Even couples were abandoning each other to save their own skins. You were right, Ziyuan whispered, her voice trembling. This place really is cursed. We were almost at the exit when the floor beneath our feet vanished. We lost our balance and plummeted into the dark abyss. Ziyuan let out a piercing scream and buried her face in my chest, eyes squeezed shut. Are you kidding me? I cursed. I pushed my phantom escape technique to its absolute limit. I kicked off falling debris, desperately trying to climb back up, but everything was crumbling. There was no solid ground left. I looked at the girl in my arms. If I was going down, I might as well make it count. I put on a calm, heroic smile and used all my strength to throw Zi Yuan upward toward the exit. "Qin Feng," she shrieked. She reached out, trying to grab me, but the distance between us grew. As I fell into the darkness, I saw a look in her eyes I hadn't seen before, a mix of horror and something deeper. I was ready to use my red-haired monster transformation card to save myself, even if it meant being stuck in that form for 10 years. Suddenly, a white flash streaked into the ruins. It was her. The Great Demon. "You really are my guardian angel." I wanted to cry with relief. The woman in white didn't need a flying tool. She drifted through the air with ease, caught me mid-fall, and surged toward the surface. A split second later, the entire ruin collapsed completely, vanishing from the face of the earth. "You idiot. You scared me to death." Zi Yuan ran over the moment we landed, sobbing as she pulled me into a suffocating hug. After everything we'd been through, especially me sacrificing myself for her, her feelings for me had clearly shifted. *Ding. System detected host manipulated a goddess's emotions and took advantage of her. Reward, 1,000 villain points. I took advantage of her. I wanted to sue the system for slander. She was the one squeezing the life out of me. My face was buried so deep in her chest I could barely breathe. Suddenly, I felt a cold chill down my spine. I looked around. Only a few hundred people had survived the collapse. Some were celebrating, but others were staring at me with very strange expressions. "That's him. That's Qin Feng," someone shouted. My portrait had already spread across the region. Most of these people had come here specifically to capture me for the bounty. The ruins were just a distraction. Even though I was covered in dirt and soot, there was no mistaking my face. I stepped behind the woman in white and smirked at the crowd. "You want to catch me? Come on then. Try it." I was leaning hard into the fox borrowing the tiger's terror act. Everyone had just seen her fly into a collapsing void to save me. A master of that level wasn't someone they could mess with. Even if they called for backup, they wouldn't find anyone who could match her. The survivors grumbled and cursed under their breaths. They thought they'd hit the jackpot, but standing next to me was a woman who could crush them like ants. "Stop playing around," Zi Yuan whispered, pulling my sleeve. "Let's just go." "Go? What?" I turned to look at my big sister and noticed a bead of sweat on her forehead. She had just given birth and was clearly exhausted. That's why she was staying quiet and letting me do the talking. Some of the cultivators noticed her weakness too. I could see the greed returning to their eyes. "Sorry, Lin-san," I thought. "I really didn't want to do this to you, but desperate times call for desperate measures." I put on my most arrogant face and pointed toward the horizon. "What are you looking at? I don't even need my sister to deal with you. My big brother, Lin-san, is the real threat. He's the one who broke the seal and took the treasure. He's probably miles away by now, getting stronger by the second." The crowd wavered. They knew Lin-san had the box. They didn't know if my sister could still fight, but they knew for a fact that Lin-san didn't have a high-level bodyguard. One by one, the cultivators turned and sprinted away to hunt down the chosen one. I didn't wait for them to change their minds. I signaled the girls, and we started to move out. Nobody dared to block our path. We were almost clear when a figure dropped from the sky, slamming into the ground in front of us. Dust swirled as he stood up. I frowned. It was an old friend, the leader of the Tiger Gang. He looked terrible. His right hand was gone, his left eye was a bloody socket, and his body was covered in deep gashes. It looked like Lin-san had put him through the ringer back in the ruins. "Young Master Qin," the scarred man growled, his voice full of desperation. "You aren't going anywhere today." He was finished, and he knew it. Lin-san had led him into trap after trap inside the ruins, killing off his entire gang. Now, he was betting his life on me. I looked at his mangled body and curled my lip. "Look at you. You really think you're in any condition to catch me?" I didn't even blink at the scarred man. If he had been at his peak, a spirit martial realm level 3, I might have actually needed to call for backup. But now, he was a walking corpse. A heavy injury like that meant he wasn't worth my time. I could handle this myself. His eyes turned sharp. A terrifying pressure erupted from his body, shaking the air around us. Behind him, the faint image of a mountain tiger roared into existence. The crowd gasped. They all turned to the woman in white, trying to see if she was too injured to protect me. I didn't give them a second to guess. I stood there, eyes closed, perfectly still. The crowd whispered, thinking I'd lost my mind. The scarred man's fist, huge as a sandbag, whistled through the air toward my face. Then, I opened my eyes. A mysterious golden light exploded from within me. It was the power of the supreme bone. The light was sharp, like a blade forged to cut through stone. It shot out like a bolt of lightning. Thud! The sound was dull and heavy. The scarred man froze mid-lunge. A moment later, he toppled over like a collapsing mountain, kicking up a cloud of dust. He was dead. The crowd went wild. They couldn't believe what they just saw. What was that? A martial art, one shouted. You idiot, another hissed. That's a divine ability. Only those with special physiques have those. That must be the power of the supreme bone. Fear replaced their greed. No one dared to step forward as I led the girls away. Meanwhile, somewhere in the distance, I knew Lin San was cursing my name. I'd leaked the news about him breaking the seal and taking the treasure. Now, every cultivator in the region was hunting him down. Back at the Qin family estate, the news reached the ancestors. They were stunned. A 3-year-old at the Transcendent Realm Level 3 had just insta-killed a Spirit Martial Level 3 expert. It was unheard of. The first ancestor looked worried, though. He was afraid I was relying too much on the Supreme Bone's power. He feared it would warp my personality. But he'd taught me for years. He knew I had my own pride. He had to trust me. We followed the great demon sister to a hidden thicket. She gently pushed the grass aside to reveal a bamboo basket. Inside were 3 snow-white baby rabbits. They didn't look like normal rabbits. They had round heads, huge eyes, and walked on 2 legs like cartoon characters. Ziyuan's heart melted. She picked one up immediately. These are my children, the demon sister said, her voice full of exhaustion and love. I realized she was a rabbit demon. I wondered if she'd eventually transform into a rabbit-eared girl, but I pushed the thought aside. Please, take one, she pleaded, picking out the fattest one and handing it to me. Ziyuan and I were stunned. We just said they were cute, and she was giving one away. Maybe it was a local custom. Or maybe rabbits just had too many kids. Before I could say no, she slung the basket onto her back and flew off. She looked back once, eyes full of tears, before disappearing. She wasn't being cruel. She was being a mother. She knew she couldn't protect or feed all of them. By giving one to me, she ensured the survival of the rest. The little guy started crying, reaching out for its mother. I reached into my bag and pulled out a blood bodhi fruit. As soon as I held it out, the rabbit forgot all about its mom. It grabbed the fruit and started munching away happily. I felt like a confused nanny. I'd heard of people being gifted kittens or puppies, but a high-level demon rabbit? Suddenly, a system chime rang in my head. It detected an epic-grade beast cub binding to me. My eyes widened. This thing had the same talent level as my protagonist, younger brother. Even if the mother came back now, I wasn't giving it back. Then, reality hit. This wasn't a normal rabbit. It didn't drink milk. It only ate heaven and earth treasures. One blood bodhi only lasted it a single day. I looked at my dwindling stash and sighed. I only had 7 fruits left. I'd only eaten one myself, and this little ball of fur was going to eat the rest. No wonder his mom gave him away. Even a wealthy landlord couldn't afford this appetite. From now on, your name is Rice Bucket, I declared. Ziyuan rolled her eyes. Call him Bunny. No, Rice Bucket. How about Treasure? No, Rice Bucket. His name is White Rice Bucket. That's final. I felt a shift in the air. People were closing in, lured by the Qin family's bounty. The demon sister was gone, and the tiger gang threat was over, but the real hunt was beginning. I grabbed Ziyuan, and we bolted, losing our pursuers in the woods before ducking into a hidden cave. I needed more power. I opened my system interface. I had over 1 million villain points, a lucky draw, and a golden treasure chest. System, open the golden chest, I commanded. A notification flashed. I had obtained Sword Intent. Suddenly, a bone-chilling cold washed over me. In my mind's eye, a figure appeared. He stood alone, his hand resting on the hilt of a blade. The sound of the sword leaving the scabbard echoed in my soul. It was a sound of absolute loneliness and pride. A flash of brilliant, elegant light erupted. It was beautiful, yet terrifying. I felt my consciousness merging with that light. I felt like a moth trapped in a cocoon, struggling to tear through the silk to become a butterfly. Then, the barrier snapped. My aura exploded, sharp and cold like a blade leaving its scabbard. The energy was so intense that the weeds surrounding me were sliced clean off, falling to the ground in heaps. Ziyuan gasped, covering her mouth as she stared at me. I could tell what she was thinking. I wasn't human. If she remembered correctly, the genius Ling San was called the greatest swordsman of the century because he mastered sword intent at 12 years old. That record had stood for 2 years, and I, an 8-year-old kid, had just shattered it. The geniuses of this era were getting terrifyingly strong. I snapped my eyes open. A flash of golden light flickered in my pitch-black pupils. With sword intent added to my arsenal, my heaven-slicing sword draw was significantly more powerful. But I wasn't satisfied yet. I needed perfection. System, exchange for 100% compatibility, I commanded. Even though I knew the technique, I hadn't reached the great success stage. Without it, I couldn't hit the maximum damage bonus. A notification pinged. I spent 1,000,000 villain points on a great success compatibility card and used it instantly. My mind went blurry for a moment as a deeper, more profound understanding of the sword flooded my brain. Meanwhile, across the forest, Lin Sen finally managed to shake off his pursuers. He pulled out the jade box I'd swapped, his heart racing with excitement. He opened it. His expression froze. He closed it, shook it, and opened it again. Empty. He did it 3 more times, his face turning pale. Impossible, he muttered, his voice trembling. This is absolutely impossible. He couldn't accept reality. He started frantically retracing his steps, trying to figure out where he'd been robbed. Back in the cave, I wasn't done getting stronger. System, start the lucky draw. The massive prize will spun wildly before slowing to a stop. Ding. Congratulations to the host for drawing. Invincible Sword Heart. The Invincible Sword Heart was the ultimate goal for any swordsman. There was a saying, with no woman in your heart, your sword naturally becomes divine. It gave me a 10-fold damage bonus to all sword techniques. My clothes began to flutter as if caught in a wind that didn't exist. My entire presence shifted. I felt lonely and proud, like a snow lotus standing alone on a frozen cliff. The power radiating from me was enough to shake a person's soul. Ziyuan rubbed her eyes, looking at me with a strange expression. She suddenly felt like her very presence might slow down the speed of my blade. I realized I really did have a fate with the sword. 2 massive damage buffs and 100% compatibility. I couldn't even imagine how terrifying my sword draw was now. I desperately wanted to find someone to test it on. I suppressed the urge and pulled a bamboo scroll from my storage space. This was the real treasure from Lin San's box. It didn't have a single word on it, but it radiated an aura that calmed the mind instantly. Is this the sage's bamboo scroll? Ziyuan asked, her face turning serious. She examined it carefully. It is. Legend says these were passed down by ancient sages. There are 3 volumes, heaven, earth, and man. Those with fate can learn supreme paths from them. Those without fate see nothing but blank wood. I'd heard my ancestors mention this. These scrolls were highly sought after and usually caused bloodbaths whenever they appeared. Anyone who could comprehend them became a legendary powerhouse. But I stared at it for a long time and saw absolutely nothing. It didn't make sense. With my genius brain and a 100-fold boost to my understanding, how could I not see anything? It's not about intelligence, Ziyuan explained. It's about fate. It's like the Buddhists say, you either have the connection or you don't. Garbage, I muttered, feeling annoyed. If I couldn't use it, it was trash. Suddenly, White Rice Bucket, the little rabbit, seemed to sense something. He waddled over on his shaky short legs and flopped right onto the scroll. He closed his eyes, looking incredibly satisfied. Using a sage's scroll as a cooling mat? Creative kid, I said. I didn't stop him. Ziyuan just stood there, speechless. People were literally dying for this scroll, and I was letting a rabbit sleep on it. Suddenly, the sound of fighting echoed from outside the cave. I heard someone shout Lin San's name. My eyes lit up. What a coincidence. I'd been missing Lin San ever since we parted. I'd been thinking about him day and night. Let's go see, I whispered. I tucked the rabbit and the scroll into a bamboo basket, slung it onto my back, and led Ziyuan toward the noise. Under the moonlight, a group of cultivators was surrounding Lin San. They were demanding the jade box. Lin San looked terrible, covered in wounds and blood, but his protagonist aura kept him standing. He was actually holding his own against the crowd. I told you the box was empty, Lin San roared. You think we're idiots? One of the cultivators sneered, launching another attack. Ziyuan shook her head. Master Lin is a bold-faced liar. He's risking his life for a treasure he won't admit he has. Actually, I said seriously, I think he's telling the truth. The box is definitely empty. Ziyuan rolled her eyes at me. You're way too naive. Suddenly, the situation changed. Two figures blurred into the clearing. One threw a straight punch, the other a sweeping kick. The impact sent Lin San flying. He crashed through 4 or 5 trees before slamming into the ground. It was the Shiman brothers, Dalong and Erlang. The other cultivators backed off, frustrated. They had almost worn Lin San down, but these two newcomers were at the 3rd level of the Lingwu realm. They couldn't compete. Crap, I cursed under my breath. Lin San had landed right next to our hiding spot. He looked up and saw me. Qin Feng. The Shiman brothers' eyes lit up. They had hit the jackpot. Not only had they taken down Lin San, but they'd flushed out the kid with the bounty on his head too. If I say I don't know him and I'm just passing by, would you believe me? I asked weakly. What do you think? The brothers grinned like predators. They circled us, their eyes gleaming. Brother Lin, let's team up, I said, looking sincere. Lin San stood up, wiping blood from his mouth. He looked at me suspiciously. He clearly suspected I was the one who had been screwing him over. I'm afraid of being sold out, he spat. That hurts, Brother Lin. I've always looked at you like a brother from another mother. What would I gain by betraying you? Lin San hesitated. It did seem like I had no motive. Nobody was giving out prizes for bullying him, right? Before he could decide, the Shiman brothers lunged. They weren't taking any chances with two famous geniuses. They went straight for their killing moves. Crap, no sportsmanship at all. I shouted. I blurred backward, my body moving like a wild goose. Fine. If you want to fight, let's fight. Lin San's eyes went wild. He swung his long sword, and a blinding light erupted from the blade. A torrent of spiritual sword chi flooded the forest like a tidal wave. Dead leaves floating in the air were instantly ground into dust. Dozens of massive sword waves surged towards Shiman Erlang. I felt my heart skip a beat. This was the same terrifying move I'd seen that night. The sword chi tore through the air, obliterating everything in its path. It was an overwhelming display of power. Shiman Erlang's face paled. He tried to summon his own energy to block, but the collision was brutal. A massive explosion of sword energy swept through the trees. Erlang coughed up a mouthful of blood and collapsed, instantly losing his ability to fight. The surrounding cultivators scrambled to defend themselves against the shockwaves. They were terrified. So this was the heir to the Sky Sword God? This was the power of the greatest swordsman of the younger generation? Lin San stood there, panting heavily. He shot me a smug look, as if to say, I only lost to you at the Qin estate because I was being polite. My response was simple. I ducked behind him and pointed at the older brother, Shiman Dalong. Come on, you little brat. You want a piece of us? My big brother Lin says he can take 10 more like you. Lin San nearly choked on his own breath. He looked like he wanted to spit blood right then and there. He couldn't believe how shameless I was. We were supposed to be teaming up, but I was just standing there talking trash while he did all the work. He couldn't just spam that ultimate move. Each use cost him 10 years of his life force. He was literally using his lifespan to look cool, and I was treating him like a bodyguard. Shiman Dalong didn't care about Lin San's internal struggle. Seeing his brother wounded and hearing my taunts sent him into a blind rage. His spiritual energy rippled through the air like waves on a pond. He lunged, his fingers curved like lethal eagle claws. He went straight for Lin San's vitals. The air around them seemed to freeze under the pressure of his attack. Lin San cursed and raised his sword to block. Clang, clang, clang. Sparks flew as steel met claws. But Lin San had just exhausted himself with his big move. He was fighting a realm above his own, and after 3 seconds, he started to buckle. The eagle claws flashed. Blood sprayed. Lin San's face twisted in pain as deep gashes appeared across his body. The crowd held their breath. Was this the end? Qin Feng, what are you waiting for? Move. Lin San screamed, stumbling back as more wounds opened up. Shimin Dalong laughed, his voice full of contempt. You're counting on Qin Feng? Without the Qin family, he's nothing. He's just a fraud who used his brother's supreme bone to act tough. I sighed. I guess if I didn't show a little strength, people were going to keep disrespecting me. My clothes began to flutter, even though there was no wind. My entire aura shifted. I stood there, cold and solitary, like a snow lotus blooming on a jagged cliff. A sharp, peerless sword intent erupted from my body. It felt like a galaxy of stars was swirling around me. Is that sword intent? Someone in the crowd gasped. They couldn't believe their eyes. An 8-year-old child had mastered sword intent. That was years ahead of the most legendary geniuses in history. But I wasn't done yet. A second wave of power burst from my chest, a sharp, unstoppable force that felt like 1,000 blades pressing against everyone's skin. The invincible sword heart, a voice screamed in terror. The forest went silent. Sword intent was rare, but a sword heart was the stuff of legends. You could practice for a lifetime and never touch it. It was the mark of a sword god. The last person to achieve this was the sky sword god 10,000 years ago. Since he died, the world hadn't seen another. And now, an 8-year-old kid was standing there with that same divine power. Lin San was frozen. His mind went completely blank. He was the #1 sword of his generation, but standing next to me, his titles felt like a joke. Run! Dalong yelled. The Shimin brothers turned to flee. They didn't want anything to do with a monster like me. As a student of the classics, I have a saying for you, I said softly, my hand resting on my hilt. Since you've come, you might as well stay and be at peace. I drew my sword. The sound of the blade leaving the scabbard was like a silver bell ringing through the heavens. A streak of light, vast as the Milky Way, slashed through the forest. Shimin Dalong's pupil shrunk. He tried to defend himself with his claws, but it was useless. There was a sharp metallic ring, a flurry of sparks, and then a flash of blinding light. Drip, drip. A single drop of blood fell from my blade. As the dust settled, the Shimin brothers collapsed into the dirt, their blood soaking the leaves. A system notification popped up in my head. I'd earned 200 villain points for the kills. I walked over and picked up their storage bags. Inside, I found some throwing stars and a suspicious-looking book titled The Concave Convex Manual. I tucked it away for research purposes. I picked up my bamboo basket, grabbed Ziyuan's hand, and walked away. The crowd just stood there, swallowing hard. Nobody dared to follow me. You don't hunt a future sword god unless you want your entire sect erased from history. The news spread like wildfire. The entire continent was in an uproar. Back at the Qin estate, the ancestors were laughing so hard they were shaking. They had worried that giving up the supreme bone would ruin my potential, but instead, I'd manifested a sword heart. Now, they were only worried about my brother, Qin Hao, and whether he could step out of my shadow to claim his own throne. Meanwhile, in the Great Xia Palace, the emperor was busy signing decrees to bring more women into his harem. He was determined to prove that he wasn't getting old. He had no idea the demon he feared was already becoming a god. The emperor didn't even have time to enjoy picking out new women for his harem before his ministers burst in, frantic and disheveled. He was about to scold them for their lack of decorum, but then he heard the news. I had killed a 3rd-level Lingwu realm cultivator with a single strike. I had awakened both a sword heart and sword intent. The emperor couldn't sit still anymore. I was still a member of the Qin family, after all. If I returned to them now, my past sins would be forgotten. A genius with both a supreme bone and an invincible sword heart was someone with the potential to become a great emperor. The ministers urged him to act. The Qin family's hunt order for me hadn't been cancelled yet, giving the emperor a perfect excuse to kill me legally. He couldn't hesitate anymore. He gave the order to kill me at all costs. Meanwhile, I was relaxing by a small stream. Ling Xin stood by the water, looking at me with a complicated expression while I splashed around with Ziyuan. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He was a chosen one, yet an 8-year-old kid had surpassed him in the way of the sword. My heaven-slaying drawing art, boosted by my sword heart, was simply too terrifying. His own ultimate move came from a famous sword god, but I had created mine from scratch. He was spiraling into a deep pit of self-doubt. A system notification pinged in my brain. I had crushed the Chosen One's confidence and earned 100,000 villain points. That got my attention real fast. I looked up and gave him a cheeky grin. I asked him if he could teach me some basic sword moves since he was so skilled. Ling Sin exploded. He yelled at me, asking if I was trying to humiliate him. He couldn't believe someone who manifested an invincible sword heart was asking for lessons on the basics. I pulled my best innocent child face. I let my eyes well up with tears and dove into Zi Yuan's arms, complaining that he was being mean to me. I told him I really didn't know the basics. I only knew how to draw my sword. Ling San's eyes twitched. He looked like he wanted to scream. A kid who only knew one move, drawing a sword, had achieved the legendary sword heart that others spent lifetimes chasing. Another ping. Another 100,000 villain points. Zi Yuan turned on Ling San like a protective mama tiger. She scolded him for bullying a child. She already disliked him for his lack of gentlemanly grace and for causing so much death back at the ruins. Now he was picking on her future husband that she planned to raise herself. She didn't care about his backing from Tianjin City. Ling San felt bad and tried to explain. He just couldn't believe I didn't know the basics. I walked over to comfort him, telling him not to worry. I told him he was the #1 sword of the future and that he'd get his own sword heart eventually. I casually mentioned that for me, it was as easy as letting out a fart. Zi Yuan made a face of disgust, thinking I actually farted, and started teasing me again. We completely ignored Ling San's feelings. Not only were we flaunting our affection in front of a single guy, but I was rubbing salt in his wounds. I compared his life's ambition to flatulence. Ping. Another 100,000 points. I wasn't done. I turned back and told him that I actually learned sword intent first, and then the sword heart. I told him it was really simple. Ping. One more 100,000 points. Ling San grabbed his sword and walked away in silence. He needed to get away from this bear child before his heart literally gave out from the stress. I didn't let him go that easily. I just made 400,000 points off a few sentences. I threw on my shoes and chased after him like human superglue. Suddenly, the sky turned dark. A thunderous roar shook the clouds, and a terrifying pressure descended over the land for thousands of miles. The void itself began to tremble. A massive figure riding a strange beast appeared in the sky, followed by thousands of armored elite guards. It was Chang Kuan, the Marquis of the Sun, commander of the Imperial Guard. He announced he was there under the Emperor's orders to take my head. The cultivators nearby gasped. Chang Kuan was the Emperor's personal shadow, a powerhouse whose strength didn't need words. The fact that the entire Imperial Guard was mobilized just to kill an 8-year-old kid like me was insane. I realized things were about to get ugly. I started preparing to summon my high-level, red-haired monster transformation. Then, another explosion rocked the sky. Another army arrived, their pressure clashing directly with the Imperial Guard. The 10th ancestor of the Qin family appeared with the 13 protectors. As the local powers in the east, they weren't going to let the royals take me without a fight. The 10th ancestor claimed I was Qin family property and they would handle me. Chang Kuan didn't flinch. He mocked the Qin family, saying that if they really wanted me dead, I'd be a corpse already. He accused them of hiding a secret agenda. The 10th ancestor didn't waste words. He reached out to grab me, but Chang Kuan lunged forward with a battle axe. The two forces collided, sending a shockwave that tore the earth apart. People nearby fled in terror as the gods began to fight. Chang Kuan laughed, admitting he knew the Qin family wouldn't cooperate. He fired a signal flare into the sky. A massive character for Kuan exploded in the clouds. More flags began to appear on the horizon. The East Depot, the West Depot, and the secret police. Every major imperial faction was converging on my location. The horizon began to drown in shadows as the great families arrived. At least 100,000 people flooded the area. My 10th ancestor's face paled. He hadn't expected this many. It wasn't just a pursuit anymore. If I didn't die today, a full-scale war was going to break out. Chang Kuan stood tall, his battle axe gleaming with a cold, murderous light. He looked out over the valley and declared my death sentence to the world. He didn't care who tried to stop him. The crowd trembled. Nobody had ever seen a spectacle like this. To kill one kid, the Emperor of Great Xia had mobilized an entire nation's worth of power. It showed just how terrified he was of my potential. Then, the clouds above churned again. A cold laugh echoed from the distance. Another 100,000 soldiers marched forward, their footsteps making the earth shudder. A black flag with the character Qin fluttered in the wind. Suddenly, 5 more figures appeared beside the 10th ancestor. The 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th ancestors had all arrived. Lin Sin stood nearby, looking completely stunned. He thought the trouble he'd caused was big, but compared to the chaos surrounding me, his antics looked like a playground fight. The air was thick with killing intent. Chong Kun sneered at my family, asking if they were really going to protect me at all costs. The 5th ancestor, the highest-ranking man there, didn't even look at the Imperial Guard. He treated the Emperor's elite units like trash. In this empire, the great families held the real power. The secret police and the guards were only there to bully commoners. Why bother with a trial for this animal? A representative from another family shouted. He harmed his own kin. Just kill him now. They didn't care about the truth. They just saw an opportunity to eliminate the Qin family's greatest genius while the Emperor was providing cover. They were too cowardly to strike first, so they egged the royals on, hoping to hide behind them. Zi Yuan's brow furrowed. She didn't believe a word of it. Over the last few days, she'd heard the rumors about me digging out my brother's spiritual bone, but she trusted what she saw with her own eyes. She saw me give away precious blood bodhi fruits to help a stranger. She saw me face death to give her a chance to live. To her, I was just a kind, innocent boy being framed. She decided right then that she wouldn't let me fall into anyone's hands. This is none of your concern, the 5th ancestor said firmly. He moved to take me away by force. If Qin Feng doesn't die, we fight. Chong Kun roared. His energy exploded, making the space around him vibrate. His axe radiated a blinding light. War, war, war. The soldiers' cries shook the sky. My ancestors sharpened their gaze. They were ready. The original plan was to keep my talents hidden until I was strong enough to be unstoppable, but the Emperor's fear had forced their hand. I watched them, feeling incredibly annoyed. I'd spent 8 years acting like a perfect, obedient child. I finally left home to have some fun, and now I was about to be dragged back into seclusion. If this turned into a war, I'd have to use my red-haired monster form and go home to be a good boy for another decade. Then let's end this. Chong Kun spurred his beast and dived toward me. The roar of the armies was deafening. Thousands of cultivators charged, their auras clashing like thunder. Lin San and the others were shaking, cursing my name. I was the disaster, but they were the ones caught in the crossfire. Suddenly, Zi Yuan stepped in front of me. Her face was set with grim determination. She held up a purple jade medallion. Stop! Someone screamed. The charging armies ground to a halt. That medallion was a life plate, given by a supreme master. Breaking it was like a distress signal that could summon a powerhouse across space and time. I stared at her back. I'd taken a gamble on her, but I didn't realize I'd hit the jackpot. It looked like my future of being taken care of by a beautiful protector was secured. It's just a piece of jade. Chong Kun blustered, though his voice lacked conviction. Great Xia had masters too, like the Emperor and the retired sovereigns. Zi Yuan didn't waste time talking. She slammed the jade onto the ground. It shattered with a crisp crack. Holy crap, Chong Kun cursed. He didn't expect her to actually do it. Usually, people negotiate first, but she went straight for the nuclear option. A low, ancient roar tore through the air. A massive claw, large enough to cover the sun, reached out from a rift in the sky. Lightning danced around it. Ancient runes glowed, weaving together the laws of the universe. The pressure was enough to make the world sink. When the full creature emerged, everyone stopped breathing. It was a giant turtle. No, a black tortoise, the legendary spirit beast Xuanwu. Standing atop its massive head was a woman of breathtaking beauty. She wore a flowing red dress, her eyes misty and her presence radiating an effortless, dangerous charm. The moon goddess of the music dynasty. Chang Kuan whispered, his pupils shrinking. She was one of the top 5 experts of her nation. Even her own emperor treated her with total respect. She was also one of the 4 great beauties of the Wasteland Valley, with a line of legendary suitors long enough to circle the empire. And now, she was here for me. This was the absolute ceiling of power in the Wasteland Valley. Looking at the moon goddess, I realized just how long the road ahead of me really was. With her presence alone, she suppressed hundreds of thousands of soldiers and experts, including the top-tier ancestors of my own Qin family. My family elders exchanged shocked glances. They had no idea how I'd managed to summon a powerhouse like her. But I could see the wheels turning in their heads. This was the perfect excuse to send me abroad to the music dynasty for my own safety. "Oh, it's quite lively here, isn't it?" the moon goddess said. Her voice was sultry and melodic, sending a literal shiver through every man on the battlefield. "Moon goddess, this is Great Xia territory. You have no right to act so boldly here." Chang Kuan roared. His voice broke the spell she had cast over the soldiers, but even he looked shaken. It was no wonder she was called one of the 4 great beauties of the valley. One sigh from her was enough to make an army lose its will to fight. "I'm so scared," she whispered playfully. She flicked her slender finger toward Chang Kuan. A bang echoed through the air. Chang Kuan sprayed a mouthful of blood and slammed into the ground like a broken doll. He was barely breathing, his life hanging by a thread. The crowd trembled. She didn't negotiate. She didn't warn. She just struck. Even a high-ranking commander of the Great Xia couldn't handle a casual flick of her wrist. "Commander!" his men screamed, rushing to perform emergency first aid. The other noble families just watched coldly, probably already planning what to eat at his funeral. "Ziyuan, where do you think you're going?" the moon goddess glanced down. Ziyuan was currently trying to sneak away with me in tow. With another flick of the goddess's finger, we both started floating in midair. Ziyuan knew she was caught. She looked like a child who had broken a vase, fidgeting with her clothes. "Auntie," she mumbled. "Auntie." I looked at the moon goddess and then back at Ziyuan. This wasn't an ant. This was a goddess. I decided right then and there that I was done working hard. I needed to hook this auntie for the long term. "So you still remember I'm your aunt?" The moon goddess knocked Ziyuan on the head. Running away from home is one thing, but running to the Great Xia? If something happened to you, how would I face your parents? "I'm sorry, auntie. Stop hitting me." Ziyuan pointed at me to divert the attention. "Look, I found a genius. His name is Qin Feng. He's mastered sword intent and has an invincible sword heart." The moon goddess stopped. She looked at me with genuine interest. The music dynasty had heard rumors about a genius born in the Qin family, but they also heard I had been crippled after digging out my brother's bone. They thought I was finished. They didn't expect me to have evolved into something even more terrifying. I put on my most serious face. "Sister Moon Goddess, do you believe in love at first sight?" She blinked, then burst into a melodious laugh. "You're so young, and you already know about love? Or are you just attracted to my beauty?" "You caught me," I said, totally shameless. "I'm definitely attracted to your beauty. I've decided, when I grow up, I'm going to marry you." My family ancestors were cheering in their heads. They wanted me to secure the bag, preferably with that legendary black tortoise as a dowry. If not, they were perfectly happy to sell me off as a live-in son-in-law. The moon goddess laughed so hard she swayed. She had countless legendary suitors, but this was the first time an 8-year-old had proposed to her in public. The men in the crowd were dazed. Seeing her smile like that made them feel like they could die happy. Ziyuan, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to kick me off the tortoise. She had risked everything to save me, and here I was hitting on her aunt. "Little brother," the moon goddess smiled. "You aren't very big, but your confidence is massive." "A man's confidence doesn't come from his height," I replied solemnly. "It comes from the depth of his shamelessness." "You little rogue. I like you," she chuckled. She was becoming more interested in me by the second. Suddenly, a gravelly, ancient voice echoed from the horizon. "Moon goddess, your presence is an honor, but Qin Feng has harmed his own kin. I hope you will give the Qin family face and hand him over." And if I say no? Her eyes narrowed. Regardless of my character, my talent was too great to let go. Any empire would open its gates for a kid like me. Then don't blame me for being a poor host. The first ancestor of the Qin family appeared in a flash. There were no flashy effects. He looked like a frail, ordinary old man. But no one dared to look down on him. He was a founder of the Great Xia and its strongest fighter. I've been wanting to see the strength of the Great Xia's #1, the moon goddess said, her dress fluttering as her aura surged. The black tortoise let out a low roar that made the soldiers turn pale. Ancestor, wait. A high-pitched voice broke the tension. Everyone turned to see a small, pale boy walking forward, supported by my father, Qin Tian. It was my brother, Qin Hao. Ancestor, I want to handle this fight myself, Qin Hao said. His eyes were burning with a fierce light. Even without his supreme bone, his spirit wasn't broken. The first ancestor looked pleased. This was perfect. It avoided a war with the moon goddess, got me safely out of the country to grow stronger, and ignited a fire in Qin Hao. Are you sure? The ancestor asked. I'm sure, Qin Hao nodded. I will show my brother what true strength looks like. Suddenly, a system notification pinged in my brain. A destiny duel had been triggered. The more psychological trauma I inflicted on my brother, the better the reward, up to mythic rank. System, you're a real piece of work, I thought. But the rewards were too good to pass up. True strength. I let out a manic laugh, channeling my inner villain. True strength is the power I possess. Throughout the heavens and earth, I alone am the supreme one. I stopped hiding. I let my sword intent explode. The air turned sharp. Then, I unleashed the god's light, and the pressure of the invincible sword heart weighed down on everyone. But the real shock came when I opened my eyes fully. The crowd went insane. Their eyes widened like saucers, and a heavy silence fell over the battlefield. The pupils of the ancients. Someone whispered in terror. The legendary double pupils. I looked down at my brother, my gaze cold and piercing. Tell me, my foolish little brother, do you feel despair yet? I could see the horror in their eyes. It was as if they were looking at a monster, not a child. I was 8 years old, already in the supernatural realm, possessing a supreme bone and now the pupils of the ancients. It was too much for them to process. I felt like a god standing among mortals. Even the moon goddess was speechless. I could see the gears turning in her head. She didn't just want me anymore. She was ready to do whatever it took to kidnap me and bring me back to her empire. My own family ancestors looked like they had been slapped. They had lived with me for 8 years and had no clue I was hiding this level of power. They turned their glares toward my father, Qin Tian. He looked just as shocked as they were, which only made them angrier. I could practically see them imagining him tied to a tree and beaten for his incompetence. How could a father not know his own son was a walking legend? Down below, Lin San was shaking his head in denial. He couldn't accept that I had another trump card hidden up my sleeve. A system notification pinged in my mind. I had just crushed a child of destinies, confidence, and earned 100,000 villain points. That was a nice little bonus. But the real target was my brother. Qin Hao was trembling. The pressure I was emitting felt like a mountain crushing his chest. He looked so small, so insignificant, like an ant I could crush with a single thought. The system chimed again. The mission progress was at 90%. I needed one last push for that mythic rank reward. I wasn't about to stop now. I circulated my spiritual energy, and golden runes began to swirl around my body. These weren't just any symbols. They were the mark of a god-level cultivation technique reached to absolute perfection. The crowd went ballistic. People spent their entire lives killing each other over scraps of high-tier manuals. Yet here I was, having mastered a god-level technique I created while I was still in the womb. The gap between us was a canyon. Qin Hao felt it. He had his own innate technique, but it was only saint level. He would have to spend years evolving it just to reach where I started. 95%, the system whispered. I decided to go all out. I unleashed a golden sword seal, the signature of a god-level sword technique at perfection. My heaven-slaying draw was no longer a secret. The entire battlefield fell into a deathly silence. It wasn't just talent anymore. It was something beyond comprehension. I wasn't just surpassing my generation. I was stepping over history itself. My foolish little brother, I said, letting a wicked smile curl on my lips. Do you feel the despair yet? The system hit 100%. The mythic chest was mine, provided I won this duel. Qin Hao stumbled back, his face pale with terror. He looked like he wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. But then, my father, Qin Tian, stepped forward. He placed a heavy hand on Hao's shoulder. He didn't say a word, but he gave him a look of pure, unwavering belief. It worked. My brother's face turned bright red, his eyes burning with a sudden, desperate fire. "I can do it," he screamed at the sky. "I will defeat you." The crowd shook their heads. Even with his renewed spirit, nobody believed he stood a chance. Without his supreme bone, he was a sparrow trying to fight a dragon. But the ancestors were secretly pleased. They thought this was all a grand performance I was putting on just to spark my brother's fighting spirit. They thought I was playing the villain for the good of the family. Zi Yuan watched me from the sidelines, her eyes filled with confusion. She knew me as a kind, talented boy. Now, she saw a man who would do anything for power, someone who would even torment his own blood. I could tell she was starting to wonder who I really was. Suddenly, the sky tore open. Two figures draped in dragon robes stepped out of the void. It was the Emperor of Great Xia and the retired Emperor. The heavy hitters had arrived. The moon goddess narrowed her eyes. She knew this was trouble. She could handle one Qin ancestor, but two emperors and their armies? Even with her sacred beast, the black tortoise, this was a losing battle. "Qin, old man," the retired emperor bellowed, his voice shaking the earth. "Is your family planning to betray Great Xia?" The Qin ancestor didn't blink. Qin Feng harmed his own kin. He is no longer a member of the Qin family. What he does is his own business. The emperors didn't waste another second. The retired emperor lunged forward, his fist glowing like a falling star, shattering the space around him. The current emperor joined in, both of them determined to kill me before I could leave their borders. The moon goddess hissed in frustration. She knew she had to retreat. Seeing the chaos, I dropped the supreme villain act instantly. I lunged forward and grabbed onto the moon goddess's long, slender leg, clinging to her like a terrified child. "Sister Moon Goddess, save me," I yelled, my voice full of fake panic. Zi Yuan rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. 1 second, I was the arrogant peak of martial arts, and the next, I was a shameless brat begging for protection. I didn't care about my reputation. I cared about staying alive. The two emperors weren't playing around. They launched a relentless barrage of attacks at the moon goddess, their golden energy exploding like 1,000 suns. The black tortoise let out a low, vibrating roar that shook the very foundation of the earth. Suddenly, the sky cracked. The moon goddess didn't stay to chat. She tore through space, and as she stepped into the void, a path of divine lightning cleared the way for her. She looked majestic, standing between heaven and earth, looking down on all living things like ants. The retired emperor and the current emperor of Great Xia were panicking. They knew exactly how dangerous it was to let me escape. Great Xia was already on a downward spiral. If I went back to the Qin family, I'd be a threat to their throne. If the Manhwa dynasty kept me, they'd have a weapon that could destroy the empire. "Why are you all just standing there?" The retired emperor screamed at the other great families. "Attack!" The heads of the other powerful families hesitated. They were doing the math in their heads. I was a ruthless kid who had just crippled my own brother for power. If they kill me today, fine. But if they tried and failed, I'd come back and wipe out their entire bloodlines in 10 years. Besides, why should they care which emperor sat on the throne? As long as they stayed rich and powerful, the music would keep playing and the dancing would never stop. Finally, they joined the fray. On the surface, it looked like a fierce battle. Fierce as a tiger, as they say. But if you looked closely, their damage output was basically zero. They were masters of fishing, doing just enough work to look busy without actually helping. They fulfilled the emperor's order while secretly handing me a favor. The Qin ancestors saw right through it. They didn't say a word. They'd spent their whole lives fishing during imperial missions, too. The moon goddess glanced at the Qin ancestors. When she saw they weren't actually trying to stop her, she felt the pressure lift. Fighting 3 old monsters would have been a death sentence, but dealing with just the 2 emperors? She could handle that. The 2 emperors were losing their minds. They fought with everything they had, but the black tortoise's defense was just too high. It soaked up every explosion like it was nothing. With a team of allies who were basically cheerleaders, there was no way they could stop us. With one final surge of power, The black tortoise tore through the void and vanished. "We're leaving," the emperor of Great Xia hissed, his face dark with rage. He turned and led his secret police and eunuch guards away. He wanted to declare war on the Qin family right then and there, but he knew it was impossible. He had no real proof of betrayal, and the other families wouldn't lift a finger to help him. The Qin ancestor watched the spot where I disappeared. There was a flicker of sadness in his eyes. From now on, my path in the Enrolment dynasty was mine to walk alone. They couldn't help me anymore. "Brother, I will defeat you," Qin Hao muttered, his small face dead serious. He looked like he was ready to train until his bones broke. Even Ling Sang had a new fire in his eyes. "I won't lose to you next time, Qin Feng. I'll surpass a monster like you." Meanwhile, back at the Enrolment dynasty, the black tortoise emerged in the middle of the moon goddess palace. Ziyuan and I were right behind her. "Welcome back, moon goddess." "Welcome, goddess-to-be." The entire palace was filled with women. They all knelt in a massive display of respect. "Goddess-to-be." I looked at Ziyuan. She tilted her chin up, looking incredibly smug. Her face basically said, "That's right, I'm the next moon goddess." I sighed. The moon goddess palace was doomed. I'd seen this girl fight. She looked like a toddler throwing a tantrum. I couldn't imagine her leading a sect. "What did you say?" Ziyuan snapped. She stomped her foot, looking for any excuse to teach me a lesson. We started chasing each other around the palace grounds like idiots. The female disciples were stunned. Their palace had a strict, no men allowed, rule since the day it was founded. Now, the moon goddess herself had brought back a boy. "That's enough," the moon goddess said, stopping our bickering with a beautiful smile. "Qin Feng, how would you like to join my moon goddess palace?" "Of course," I said, nodding quickly. "According to the rules of the world, since you saved my life, I should probably marry you." Ziyuan looked like she wanted to bite me. She couldn't believe I was already hitting on her aunt. The moon goddess just laughed. "You really are an interesting little guy. From this moment on, I officially appoint you as the holy son of the moon goddess palace." "My lady," the disciples cried out. "The rules. We don't take male disciples." "I know exactly what I'm doing," the moon goddess replied, her eyes locked on me with a strange intensity. Anyone who had seen my talent would break every rule in the book to keep me. Back in Great Xia, the emperor was throwing a fit. Ever since the Enrolment dynasty had reformed a century ago, they'd become a massive headache. Now that they had a freak of nature like me, he couldn't even sleep. "The Qin family is responsible for this," one minister shouted. "They let him go. They're a cancer that needs to be removed." "Easier said than done," another countered. "The Qin family is too deep-rooted." An old minister stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we must recruit and train geniuses from the common people. We need to break the stranglehold the great families have on our power." The emperor sighed. Breaking the family's foundation was the only way to save the empire, but if he took away their interests, they'd just overthrow him and put someone else on the throne. Just then, a young eunuch rushed in. "Your Majesty, Princess Ninfeng has sent word. She met an interesting youth recently, someone who claims to have a way to break the great families."